Welcome to the Crime for Sleep channel. Let me know where you're watching from and what time it is. And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Story 1. I remember the first time I stepped into apartment 4B of the Parkview Heights building. The hallway carried that distinctive scent of old carpet and faded memories, a smell you can only find in buildings that have witnessed decades of lives coming and going. My footsteps echoed softly against the worn tile floor as I approached the door, notebook in hand, recorder in my pocket. This was supposed to be a routine investigation. Strange, yes, but nothing that would keep me awake at night. I was wrong. The apartment had officially been vacant for 3 years and 7 months. The previous tenant, Martin Wells, had moved out in the winter of 2021, at least according to the building's records. The landlord, George Kemp, a man with perpetually worried eyes and hands that never stopped moving, had avoided the unit since then. He claimed it was because of pending renovations, budget constraints, and administrative delays. But standing beside him now, watching his fingers tremble as he fumbled with the keys, I sensed there was more to the story. I should have checked sooner, George whispered, more to himself than to me, but the rent kept coming in, every month like clockwork. The key slid into the lock with a reluctant scrape. When the door swung open, the smell hit us first, not the musty staleness you'd expect from an abandoned space, but something lived in, present. A faint trace of coffee and laundry detergent hung in the still air. George remained in the doorway as I stepped inside, my recorder now running in my pocket. The apartment was small, a one-bedroom with an open kitchen and living area. What struck me wasn't what was missing, but what remained. The furniture was still there, a beige couch facing a blank wall where a television might once have stood, a small dining table with 2 chairs, kitchen cabinets left slightly ajar. Martin took almost nothing when he left, George explained, his voice barely above a whisper. Said he was starting fresh somewhere else. I didn't ask questions. He'd been a good tenant for 15 years. I moved toward the kitchen, noting how the countertops were wiped clean, yet not dusty. In the sink sat 2 plates and a coffee mug, washed but not put away. The refrigerator hummed softly. It was running, despite George's insistence that the utilities had been disconnected years ago. "Did you come in here recently?" I asked, opening the refrigerator door to find it empty except for a carton of milk. I checked the expiration date, 3 days from now. George shook his head, his face pale. "I haven't been in here since Martin left. That's why I called you. The building manager noticed a water bill for this unit last month, then the electricity. We thought it was an administrative error." I continued through the apartment, my steps deliberate and slow on the hardwood floor. The bathroom door was partially open. Inside, 3 towels hung neatly on the rack. A toothbrush stood in a cup by the sink, and draped over the shower rod was a shirt, still damp to the touch. "Someone's been living here," I said, stating the obvious as I examined the shirt, a plain blue button-down, size medium. Nothing remarkable except its presence in an allegedly vacant apartment. But how the locks were never changed because we were planning to renovate. "But no one has a key except management," George replied, remaining firmly in the living room, unwilling to venture deeper into the mystery. The bedroom was the last space to examine. The door was closed. As I turned the knob, I felt a strange resistance, not from a lock, but almost as if someone were holding it from the other side. After a moment, it gave way. The bedroom was meticulously organized. The bed was made with hospital corners, a dark blue comforter pulled tight across the mattress. On the nightstand sat a journal, its leather cover worn at the edges. Next to it, a pair of reading glasses and a glass of water, half empty. I picked up the journal, feeling the weight of its pages between my fingers. Opening it revealed neat, precise handwriting. The first entry was dated 3 years ago, just 2 weeks after Martin Wells had supposedly moved out. Day one in the invisible life, it began. It's strange how easily you can disappear while staying exactly where you are. George thinks I've gone. Everyone does. The rent is set to auto-pay from my account until the funds run out. By then, it won't matter anymore. I flipped through the pages, each one documenting a day in the life of a man who was supposedly gone but had never left. The entries described his new routine, how he would leave only at night, how he had tapped into the building's utility lines, how he would freeze whenever maintenance workers came near, living like a ghost in his own former home. The final entry was dated yesterday. I heard them talking outside today. They know something isn't right. The water bill, they said, such a small detail to give away my existence. After all this time, it's almost a relief. I've been practicing my disappearance for so long that I sometimes wonder if I'm still here at all. Perhaps I'm not. Perhaps I never was. Tomorrow they'll come looking. Will they find me, or merely the evidence that I once was? Mr. Kemp, I called out, my voice steadier than I felt. When was the last time you actually saw Martin Wells? George appeared in the doorway, his face a mask of confusion. The day he handed in his keys, February 18th, 2021, he said he was moving to Arizona to be near his sister. I handed him the journal. You might want to read this. As George took the journal with trembling hands, I noticed something under the bed, a small suitcase partially visible. Kneeling down, I pulled it out and laid it on the mattress. Inside were neatly folded clothes, a passport in the name of Martin Wells, and an envelope containing $5,000 in cash. He never left, George whispered, looking up from the journal. All this time. I nodded slowly, processing the reality of what we discovered. The question is, where is he now? It was then that we heard it, a soft, almost imperceptible sound from somewhere in the apartment. A drawer sliding closed, the whisper of fabric against skin, the unmistakable presence of someone who didn't want to be found. George and I exchanged glances. The apartment that had seemed small and confined suddenly felt vast with hiding places. Closets we hadn't checked, the space behind the shower curtain, the narrow utility room off the kitchen. Martin, George called out, his voice breaking. Are you here? Only silence answered. We searched the apartment thoroughly, every closet, every possible hiding spot. We found more evidence of habitation, a stack of library books under the couch, receipts from local stores dated over the past 3 years, a hidden panel in the wall where Martin had apparently connected to the building's main electrical system. But of Martin Wells himself, we found no trace. The investigation continued for weeks. We learned that Martin's Social Security checks had been deposited directly into his account, which funded the automatic rent payments. His sister in Arizona had received postcards from him, postmarked from our city, describing his fictional new life in the desert. No one had reported him missing because no one believed he was gone. The security cameras in the building's hallways revealed nothing. Martin had learned their blind spots, their timing. He had become an expert in invisibility. Sometimes at night, I find myself driving past the Parkview Heights building, looking up at the windows of apartment 4B. The lights are always off now, the unit truly vacant at last. But I can't help wondering if we simply didn't look hard enough, if Martin Wells is still there somehow, living between the walls, existing in the negative spaces. The journal's final words haunt me still. Will they find me, or merely the evidence that I once was? Perhaps that was all Martin Wells wanted in the end, not to be found, but to be known. To leave proof that he had existed, even as he disappeared. The case remains technically open, but leads have gone cold. Sometimes I think about the damp shirt hanging in the bathroom, still waiting to dry, about the half-empty glass of water by the bed, about how quickly a person can vanish, even when they never actually leave. And I wonder how many others like Martin are out there, people who have mastered the art of disappearing while staying exactly where they've always been. Story 2, I still remember the first time Elaine Mitchell came into my office. Her fingers traced nervous patterns on the arm of the chair as she spoke, voice barely above a whisper. The late afternoon light filtered through the blinds, casting striped shadows across her face that seemed to emphasize the dark circles under her eyes. She hadn't been sleeping, that much was obvious. The call came from a number she didn't recognize, she told me, recounting the beginning of her ordeal. The voice on the other end was clear and calm, reciting details from her past, things she had never told anyone. When she asked who it was, the voice replied, "I've been listening for years." Elaine was speaking about herself in the third person, a psychological distancing technique I'd seen before in trauma victims. I let her continue, the soft scratch of my pen against paper the only sound besides her voice. The calls had started 3 months ago, always from different numbers, always untraceable. The caller knew where she grew up in that small Minnesota town, knew about the scar on her left knee from falling off her bicycle when she was 9, knew about the poetry she wrote in journals she kept hidden under her mattress as a teenager. "He knows things nobody else could possibly know," she said, her voice cracking slightly. The heating system in my office hummed gently in the background, a warm counterpoint to the chill that had settled in the room as she spoke. "I've been a private investigator for 15 years, specializing in stalking cases the police consider too ambiguous to pursue. Elaine's case intrigued me from the beginning. The caller never made explicit threats. He never said he was watching her or planning to hurt her. He simply knew her intimately, in ways that defied explanation. The police had dismissed her concerns. No threats meant no crime. Just block the numbers, they said, but new ones always appeared. I started where I always do, with the victim, who had access to Elaine's life, ex-boyfriends, colleagues, neighbors. I compiled a list while sitting in my car outside her apartment building, the leather seat cool beneath me, the faint smell of coffee from my thermos filling the small space. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor of a renovated brownstone in the quieter part of town. I watched as lights switched on and off in different rooms, the glow spilling onto the small balcony where potted plants created living curtains. I couldn't help but wonder if someone else was watching too. The next day I began interviewing people from her past. Her ex-husband seemed genuinely concerned and had a solid alibi. He'd been living in Seattle for the past 2 years. College roommates, former colleagues, neighbors, none raised red flags. Then came the break I wasn't expecting. Elaine called me at 3:17 a.m., her voice trembling. He just called again, but this time, he knew what I was wearing right now in my bedroom. I arrived at her apartment 20 minutes later. The night was unusually still, the kind of silence that feels heavy, expectant. Elaine sat rigid on her sofa, hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. On the coffee table in front of her, her phone screen glowed softly in the dim room. "I recorded it," she said, not looking up. I pressed play and a male voice filled the room. smooth, articulate, almost pleasant if not for the context. The blue cotton pajamas with the frayed left sleeve, the voice said calmly. You've had them since college. You're sitting by the window now, looking out at the street below, wondering if you can see me. You can't. The recording continued, describing details of her bedroom that couldn't be seen from outside, the arrangement of books on her nightstand, the half-empty glass of water, the specific page number of the book she'd been reading before bed. That's when I knew we weren't dealing with a conventional stalker. This was something else entirely. The next morning, I called in a favor with an old friend at the city's largest internet provider. The apartment building had been wired for smart home capabilities during its renovation 3 years ago. Elaine's unit, like all the others, came with a pre-installed system, lights, thermostat, door locks, all controllable through a smartphone app. And security cameras, small, discreet, easily overlooked in corners of rooms. I asked Elaine if she used the smart home system. She looked confused. I've never set it up, she said. I'm not great with technology. The landlord mentioned something about it when I moved in, but I never bothered. I borrowed her laptop, the keys cool and smooth beneath my fingertips as I typed. It took less than an hour to discover the truth. The default passwords had never been changed. The cameras in her living room, kitchen, even bedroom had been activated remotely months ago. Someone had been watching her, listening to her, learning her most intimate details by simply observing her in what she believed was the privacy of her own home. The next step was setting a trap. We left her phone on the kitchen counter, screen unlocked, a text message draft visible. I know who you are, I have proof. Meet me tomorrow or I go to the police. Then we waited in my car across the street, the windows slightly fogged from our breath in the cool night air. Hours passed, the streetlights casting orange pools on the empty sidewalk. At 2:13 a.m., a figure approached the building's entrance. Average height, nondescript clothing, face partially obscured by a baseball cap. He used a key to enter, not breaking in, but accessing the building legitimately. Elaine gasped softly beside me. That's the building superintendent, she whispered. Mark something. He helped me move furniture when I first moved in. We waited until he entered the building, then followed quietly. The lobby was dimly lit, the faint scent of cleaning products hanging in the air. We took the stairs instead of the elevator, our footsteps muffled on the carpeted steps. We found him in her apartment, standing in her bedroom, looking at her phone. When he saw us in the doorway, he didn't run. He didn't seem surprised. He simply nodded as if he'd been expecting this moment all along. You should have changed your passwords, he said, his voice exactly matching the one from the recordings. People never secure their networks, their cameras, their lives. Later, as the police took him away, I learned the full story. Mark Ellison had been doing this for years to dozens of tenants. The building's smart home systems were his playground, his window into private lives. He collected information, built detailed profiles. The calling was new, an escalation born from his growing desire for connection with his unwitting subjects. The police found archives of recorded footage from apartments throughout the building. Thousands of hours of people going about their private lives, unaware they were being watched. Elaine Mitchell moved away shortly after that night. She couldn't bear to stay in the apartment, knowing what had happened there. I sometimes wonder about her, wonder if she ever feels truly alone anymore, or if the sensation of being watched has become a permanent shadow in her life. As for me, I went home after the case and disconnected every smart device in my house. Some nights, when the heating system hums on and the house settles into its familiar creaks, I still find myself glancing at the corners of rooms, looking for the glint of a camera lens. Because I've learned what Elaine learned, in our connected world, privacy is an illusion easily shattered. And sometimes, the stranger who knows your voice has been listening all along, just on the other side of a digital wall, breathing silently in the dark. Story 3. I remember the first time I visited the Harmon house, that old Victorian mansion on Sycamore Lane. It was early October, the kind of autumn day where golden light filters through half-bare branches, casting long shadows across weathered brick and ornate trim. The air had that particular crispness to it, carrying both the sweetness of fallen leaves and something else, something older and less definable. The new owners, Claire and Michael Pembroke, had called our department that morning. Their voices carried an unusual blend of confusion and unease, not the panic or hysteria I typically hear in my line of work. As I pulled up to the curb, gravel crunching softly beneath my tires, I wondered what exactly constituted their non-emergency situation that required professional attention. Claire met me at the door, her cardigan pulled tight around her shoulders despite the warmth of the day. Her smile was polite but strained, dark circles beneath her eyes suggesting several sleepless nights. She led me through a foyer with half-stripped wallpaper and the subtle scent of fresh paint. "It's in here," she said quietly, pushing open a heavy oak door to what appeared to be a sitting room. The space was caught between two eras, modern scaffolding and paint supplies against one wall, a plastic tarp covering half the hardwood floor. But it was the other half of the room that drew my attention. A Queen Anne side table with intricate inlay work stood beside a burgundy velvet armchair that had seen better days. A brass floor lamp with a fringed shade cast a soft pool of amber light over a small Persian rug. "These aren't yours," I stated rather than asked, running my fingertips over the table's polished surface. Michael stepped into the doorway, arms crossed. "We've been renovating room by room since we bought the place last month. This one was completely empty 2 days ago, just stripped floors and primer on the walls." "And you woke up yesterday to find this," I gestured to the furniture. "Not just yesterday," Claire said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Every morning there's something new, a chair, a lamp, a small table, always old pieces, always arranged as if they belong here." I pulled out my notebook, the soft scratch of pen against paper oddly comforting in the stillness of the room. Any signs of forced entry? "None," Michael replied. "We've checked every door, every window. The security system hasn't been triggered. It's an old house, but we had new locks installed the day we moved in." I walked slowly around the furniture grouping, noting the subtle impressions in the rug beneath the chair legs. "Have you moved any of these items?" Claire nodded. "The first time it happened, a single wooden chair in the kitchen. We thought maybe it was left by the previous owners in the basement, and one of the contractors brought it up. We moved it to the garage." "And it was back the next morning, in the exact same spot." I knelt down to examine the underside of the table, dust coating my fingertips. The previous owners, the Harmons, how long had they been gone before you purchased the house? Michael leaned against the door frame. "About 6 months. The place had been sitting vacant since Mrs. Harmon moved to assisted living after her husband passed." Something about this detail made me pause, the way certain inflections in a witness statement sometimes do. "And before that, how long had they lived here?" "Nearly 50 years, Claire answered. Eleanor Harmon was reluctant to sell, according to our realtor. Said she'd promised her husband they would grow old together in this house. I made a note of this, the soft ticking of my wristwatch the only sound for several long moments. Would you mind showing me the other items that have appeared? They led me through the house, a patchwork of renovation chaos and inexplicably arranged antiques. A rocking chair positioned perfectly by a bay window in the master bedroom, a roll-top desk in what would become a home office, a child's wooden train set laid out in precise formation in an upstairs room with half-painted blue walls. In the dining room, crystal glasses were arranged in a formal table setting for two, their facets catching the afternoon light. Claire's hands trembled slightly as she pointed them out. "These appeared this morning," she said. "The table was clear when we went to bed." I lifted one of the glasses, noting its substantial weight and the faint pattern etched into the crystal. "Have you researched the history of the house beyond the Harmons?" Michael nodded. It was built in 1887 by a furniture maker named Joseph Blackwood. The local historical society has photographs of the original interiors. A subtle chill worked its way up my spine as I set the glass down with a soft clink against the polished wood. "And have you compared those photographs to these items?" The couple exchanged a glance that told me they had indeed made this connection, but were hesitant to voice it. "Some of the pieces look similar," Claire finally admitted, "but that doesn't explain how they're getting here." I spent the next hour examining locks, windows, the security system. Everything was as they described, no signs of entry, no malfunctions. I took photographs of each mysterious item, noting their placement and condition. Throughout my inspection, I couldn't shake the feeling of being watched, not with hostility, but with something closer to expectation. Back in my office that evening, the soft glow of my desk lamp casting long shadows across case files and coffee cups, I pulled up the property records for the Harmon house. The Pembroke story checked out. The house had passed from the Blackwood family to several owners before the Harmons purchased it in 1974. I dug deeper, the gentle hum of the building's ancient heating system providing a white noise backdrop to my research. Something about Joseph Blackwood nagged at me, a furniture maker whose creations might still exist more than a century later. 3 hours and several archive searches later, I found it, a small newspaper article from 1892. Local craftsman Joseph Blackwood found deceased in his home workshop. Authorities report the master furniture maker appears to have taken his own life following financial difficulties and the sale of his beloved home. A note found at the scene read only, "My life's work belongs here, as do I what has been crafted with love must remain." Further research revealed that Blackwood's estate sale had scattered his furniture creations across the county. Records showed he had kept meticulous drawings and photographs of each piece he considered his life's work. The following morning, I returned to the Pembroke home with a file of historical photographs. Claire opened the door before I could knock, her expression a mixture of relief and dread. "There's more," she said simply, leading me to the kitchen. A complete dining set now occupied the space, table, 6 chairs, and a sideboard, all in the same ornate Victorian style as the other pieces. On the table sat a leather-bound book. With gloved hands, I carefully opened it. Inside were handwritten entries and detailed sketches, Joseph Blackwood's furniture design journal. The last page contained the same message found in his suicide note, the ink faded but legible. My life's work belongs here, as do I what has been crafted with love must remain. I showed the Pembrokes my research findings and the historical photographs that matched, piece for piece, with the mysteriously appearing furniture. "What are we supposed to do?" Michael asked, voice hollow with disbelief. "Live with a house that furnishes itself with a dead man's creations?" For the next week, I helped the couple track down the history of each piece through auction records and estate sales. Some had remained in local families for generations. Others had traveled across states. All had recently changed hands, sold at estate sales, donated to thrift stores, purchased by dealers who reported the items mysteriously missing from inventory. None of the sellers or current owners could explain how the pieces had vanished from locked homes, secured storage facilities, or monitored showrooms. On the 8th day of my investigation, I arrived at the house to find Claire alone, sitting in one of Blackwood's chairs, her expression resigned. "Michael's gone to stay with his brother," she said quietly. "He can't sleep here anymore. Says he feels someone watching him, moving around the house at night." "And you?" I asked, settling into the chair opposite her, aware of how perfectly it fit the contours of my body, as if it had been waiting for this moment. "I'm staying," she replied. "I've been researching restoration techniques. These pieces, they deserve to be cared for properly." That afternoon, as I helped Claire move the last of Michael's belongings to his car, she paused in the doorway, golden autumn light casting her shadow long across the porch. "Do you think he'll ever stop?" she asked. "Blackwood, I mean, now that his furniture is home." I considered this as I watched leaves spiral down from the massive oak in the front yard. "I don't know, but I think you've made a choice he would respect." 3 months later, I received a letter from Claire. Inside was a photograph of the fully restored sitting room, Blackwood's furniture arranged exactly as it appeared in a sepia-toned photograph from 1890 that she'd included as well. Her note was brief. "The house is complete now. Nothing new has appeared since December. Sometimes I hear footsteps in the workshop Michael built in the basement, and occasionally I find wood shavings swept into a neat pile by morning. I believe he's at peace now that his creations have returned. I've decided to open the house for historical tour next spring. People should see his work as he intended all together in the home he loved." I keep that photograph on my desk now, a reminder that some mysteries aren't meant to be solved in conventional ways. Sometimes an ending isn't about finding who committed a crime, but about understanding why a soul cannot rest until what was scattered has been gathered, until what was created with love has finally come home. The Harmon House, now rightfully called the Blackwood House again, stands as a testament to this peculiar sort of justice, where the restoration of order came not through handcuffs or courtrooms, but through the simple act of allowing things to return to where they truly belong. Story 4, I still remember the weight of it in my hands that first time. The leather-bound journal was a perfect find in that dusty corner of the thrift store on Maple Street. Its cover was worn in places where countless fingers had traced the embossed pattern, a delicate intertwining of vines that seemed to shift under certain light. $3.27, that's all I paid for what would become the most valuable and terrifying possession I'd ever owned. The pages inside were blank and brittle, yellowed at the edges like old photographs. They carried that distinct scent that book lovers know so well, a mixture of dust, time, and secrets. I ran my fingertips across the first page, feeling the subtle texture of the paper against my skin. It was unseasonably cold that April evening, and I remember the soft patter of rain against my apartment windows as I settled into my reading chair, a cup of chamomile tea steaming beside me. I wrote my first entry that night. Nothing special, just the mundane details of my day, the morning commute, the meeting with my editor, the phone call from my sister. I detailed how I'd found the journal itself, describing the thrift store with its flickering fluorescent lights and the elderly shopkeeper who'd wrapped it carefully in brown paper before handing it to me. I wrote until my eyelids grew heavy, then closed the journal and placed it on my nightstand before drifting off to sleep. The next morning I reached for the journal to jot down a dream I'd had, something about corridors and locked doors, when I noticed something odd. The page after my entry wasn't blank anymore. It was filled with writing, my handwriting unmistakably with that peculiar slant to the Y's and the way I cross mites too high. But I hadn't written this entry. It described my day today in perfect detail. The coffee shop I would visit, the spilled latte on my blouse, the unexpected call from an old college friend. Events that hadn't happened yet. I closed the journal slowly, my fingers trembling slightly against the leather cover. I must have written this entry and forgotten. Perhaps I was more tired than I thought last night. I placed the journal back on the nightstand and went about my morning routine, trying to dismiss the unsettling feeling in the pit of my stomach. Later that day, as I sat in the coffee shop on 5th and Elm, the same one mentioned in the mysterious entry, I watched in quiet horror as a barista stumbled, sending a splash of latte across the front of my cream-colored blouse. The stain spread in exactly the pattern described in the journal, and when my phone rang 20 minutes later, I already knew it would be Rachel, my roommate from sophomore year, calling to tell me she was in town for the weekend. I hurried home, my heart beating a rhythm of confusion and fear against my ribs. The journal sat where I'd left it, innocuous and yet somehow threatening in its stillness. I opened it again, flipping to the entry I hadn't written. Every detail of my day was there, not just the coffee and the call, but the man with the scarlet scarf who'd asked for directions to the museum, the taxi that had splashed through a puddle beside me, the headline on the newspaper I'd glimpsed on a bench. My hands shook as I turned to the next page. More writing, tomorrow's date at the top, more predictions, no, more foretellings of what would come. I closed the journal and placed it in a drawer, sliding it beneath a stack of old magazines. I didn't want to read what tomorrow would bring. I didn't want to know. But curiosity is a powerful force. By midnight, I found myself sitting cross-legged on my bed, the journal open in my lap, reading about the day that hadn't yet happened. According to the entry, I would receive a letter from an attorney's office, informing me that an aunt I barely remembered had passed away, leaving me a small inheritance. I would also run into my ex-boyfriend at the grocery store, an awkward encounter made worse by the presence of his new partner. The next day unfolded exactly as written. The letter arrived in the afternoon mail, and Daniel was examining avocados when I turned into the produce section at Greenfield Market. His new girlfriend was exactly as described in the journal, tall, with auburn hair twisted into a loose braid, wearing a university sweatshirt and jade earrings. For weeks this pattern continued. I would read about my day in advance, then watch as each prediction came true with unsettling accuracy. The journal never failed. Small details, what I would eat for lunch, which song would be playing on the radio when I started my car, to larger events like unexpected visitors or work emergencies, all foretold in my own handwriting. I became obsessed with understanding how this was possible. I researched the history of the thrift store, learning it had once been a bookbinder's shop in the 1920s. I tracked down the previous owner of the journal, an elderly woman named Margaret Whitley, who had donated several boxes of items after her husband's death. But when I visited her small apartment in the assisted living facility across town, she had no recollection of the journal. Harold collected many strange things, she said, her rheumy eyes staring past me to the window. He was always bringing home oddities from estate sales and forgotten places. The weight of the journal's predictions began to feel oppressive. Knowing exactly how each day would unfold eliminated any sense of surprise or possibility from my life. I found myself avoiding certain places or people mentioned in the entries, attempting to disprove the journal's accuracy. But somehow, circumstances always aligned to fulfill the predictions. If the journal said I would attend a colleague's birthday dinner, something would inevitably happen to ensure I was there, despite my best efforts to avoid it. Then came the entry about the accident. According to the journal, on May 17th, I would witness a hit and run at the intersection of Willow and 4th. A blue sedan would strike a young woman in a yellow dress, then speed away. The entry described my shock, the way I would rush to the victim's side, the feel of her pulse weakening beneath my fingertips as we waited for an ambulance that would arrive too late. I couldn't let this happen. I spent the entirety of May 17th in my apartment, doors locked, blinds drawn. I called in sick to work. I ignored texts and calls. I would not go outside. I would not witness any accident. I would prove the journal wrong. At 6:37 p.m., the exact time the accident was predicted to occur, I was sitting in my living room, a sense of triumph beginning to blossom. I had defied the journal, but then I heard the distinctive sound of screeching tires, followed by a sickening thud and screams. Drawn by some force I couldn't resist, I moved to my window, which overlooked the intersection of Willow and 4th. There, lying on the rain-slicked pavement, was a young woman in a yellow dress. A blue sedan was disappearing around the corner, its tail lights glowing red in the gathering dusk. I found myself running down the stairs and into the street, kneeling beside her just as the journal had predicted. Her pulse fluttered weakly beneath my trembling fingers. The ambulance arrived with its wailing siren, but I already knew it was too late. She died there on the wet asphalt, rain mixing with the blood from her injuries, just as the journal had written. That night I sat with the journal open on my kitchen table, staring at the words that had foretold this tragedy. I could have warned her. I could have done something to prevent it, but I had been too focused on proving the journal wrong, on asserting some control over my own fate. The next entry described my guilt, my sleepless nights, the way I would begin researching the victim, Emma Chen, 24, a graduate student in marine biology. It told how I would attend her funeral, standing at the back of the crowded service, unknown to her family and friends. All of this came to pass just as written. But the entry after that was different. For the first time, the journal presented a choice. Two versions of the same day, separated by a thin line down the middle of the page. In one version, I continued my normal routine, eventually finding a way to lock the journal away and attempt to forget its existence. In the other, I returned to the thrift store, seeking answers from the elderly shopkeeper who had sold me the journal in the first place. I chose the second path. The bell above the door jingled softly as I entered the store, the familiar scent of old books and dust surrounding me. The shopkeeper was behind the counter, his gnarled hands arranging a display of vintage fountain pens. He looked up as I approached, and something in his eyes told me he had been expecting me. "You found it then," he said, his voice like dry leaves rustling. It wasn't a question. "The journal," I replied, placing it on the counter between us. "How does it work? Who wrote these entries?" He sighed, running a finger along the embossed cover. "You did," he said simply, "or you will. The journal doesn't predict the future, it remembers it." "That's impossible," I whispered, though after weeks of witnessing its accuracy, I knew better than to dismiss anything as impossible. "Time isn't linear," the shopkeeper continued, his weathered face solemn. "Not for everyone, not for everything. This journal exists at all points of its own timeline simultaneously. What you write in it today, you've already written in some future moment looking back. But I didn't write these entries, I insisted, opening the journal to show him the pages filled with my handwriting, describing events I had never recorded. Not yet, he corrected gently, but you will. When the time comes, you'll sit down and write each of these entries, recounting the days you've lived. The journal is simply showing you what you'll remember. I left the thrift store with more questions than answers, the journal heavy in my bag. That night I turned to the final written page, all the rest were still blank. The entry described my conversation with the shopkeeper, my confusion, my decision to test his theory. It told how I would sit down with a pen, flip back to the first entry after my own initial writing, and begin to recount the day exactly as I had lived it. The spilled latte, Rachel's call, every detail as it had happened. And so here I am, pen in hand, writing what I have already read, describing the weight of the leather-bound journal in my hands that first time, the dusty corner of the thrift store where I found it, the $3.27 I paid for what would become the most valuable and terrifying possession I've ever owned. I don't know why the journal chose me or what purpose it serves. I don't know if I'm trapped in some predetermined loop or if understanding the mechanics of this strange object might eventually allow me to change what seems to be written in stone. All I know is that somewhere, somewhen, I will continue writing these entries, documenting each day as it unfolds, exactly as the journal has already shown me. And perhaps in writing this account, I am passing the knowledge forward or backward to myself, a message in a bottle tossed into the strange and swirling currents of time. A warning, or perhaps an invitation, written in a journal that remembers a future I haven't yet lived. Story 5, I still remember the weight of the case file in my hands. Heavy manila folder, edges frayed from countless openings, containing photographs that defied explanation. The fluorescent lights of the precinct hummed softly overhead as I spread the contents across my desk, each item placed with deliberate care. It was nearly midnight, and the station had emptied hours ago, leaving only the occasional click of the building settling and the distant sound of traffic filtering through the windows. The Mercer case, 3 months old and growing colder by the day. I'd been assigned to it after Detective Harmon retired unexpectedly, citing health concerns, though rumors suggested otherwise. Some said the case had gotten to him. I didn't believe in such things then. The photograph lay at the center of my desk, an ordinary 8x10 family portrait taken at the Mercer family reunion in April. 23 smiling faces arranged in 3 neat rows on the steps of their lakeside cabin. Nothing remarkable about it at first glance, just another happy family documenting a moment together. Ellen Mercer had been the first to notice something wasn't right. 3 weeks after the reunion, while organizing her photo albums, she called the local police department in a state of confusion. The photograph had changed, she claimed. New faces had appeared in the background, faces that didn't belong to anyone at the reunion. The responding officer filed it as a non-emergency, possibly the delusions of an aging mind. Ellen was 72 after all, but when her daughter Diane came to visit the following weekend and saw the photo herself, she too insisted something was wrong. By then there were 4 unidentified figures visible in the background, blurry but undeniably human shapes standing among the trees behind the cabin. I picked up the original print with gloved hands, feeling the slight glossiness of the photo paper between my fingers. The timestamp in the bottom right corner read April 17th. Clear as day, those 4 figures stood in the background, their features indistinct but their presence unmistakable. There seemed to be a quality to them, a certain density that drew the eye. The digital copy on the photographer's memory card showed no such anomalies. I'd verified this myself, scrolling through the original files on the camera. Just the Mercer family, 23 people, no more, no less. No strange figures among the trees. My coffee had grown cold, the surface developing a thin film as I examined the second photograph, taken 5 weeks after the reunion. Same pose, same smiling family, but now 6 figures lurked in the background, their features slightly more defined. I could make out the hollow shapes of eyes, the suggestion of mouths. "You're still here," the voice startled me, and I looked up to see Captain Rivera standing in the doorway, her keys jingling softly against her palm. "Just going over the Mercer file again," I said, sliding the photo across the desk toward her. "Tell me what you see." She sighed but humored me, leaning forward to examine the picture under the harsh fluorescent light. The Mercer family, their reunion at Lake Oswego. And in the background, among the trees. She squinted, then frowned. 6 people standing there, blurry, but they're definitely there. "And that doesn't strike you as odd, that a family would pose for a picture while 6 strangers lurked in the woods behind them?" Rivera shrugged. Maybe they're other guests who stepped away, hired help, neighbors. The Mercers said they were alone that weekend. The nearest cabin is 2 miles away. Then they forgot. People forget things. She straightened up, keys jangling again. "Don't get obsessed like Harmon did. It's probably just double exposure or some digital glitch." But it wasn't digital, and double exposures don't gradually add more figures over time. After Rivera left, I laid out the progression of photographs in chronological order, the original from the reunion. Then the one Ellen had noticed 3 weeks later with 4 figures. The one Diane had seen a week after that with 6 figures. And finally, the most recent one, taken 2 months after the reunion, with 9 distinct figures standing among the trees. 9 figures whose features had become increasingly clear with each iteration. 9 faces now looking directly at the camera, no longer just standing there but positioned as if deliberately posing. And one of them, a tall, thin figure on the far right, appeared to be pointing directly at Ellen Mercer. 3 days after the last photo was taken, Ellen Mercer disappeared from her home. No signs of forced entry, no evidence of foul play, just an empty house, a half-drunk cup of tea, and the family photo on her bedside table, now showing 11 figures among the trees. I pulled out my recorder and pressed the small red button, the soft click echoing in the empty office. Interview with Diane Mercer, June 30th, regarding her mother's disappearance. I spoke quietly into the device before pressing play. Diane's voice filled the silence, tinged with a tremor that hadn't been present during our initial interview. "Mom called me the night before she went missing. She said the people in the photo were watching her, said they'd started appearing in other pictures around the house. Old photos from when I was a child, pictures of her wedding day, even her driver's license photo. She said they were getting closer in each one." I paused the recording, reaching for the small evidence bag containing Ellen's driver's license. With careful movements, I slid it out and held it under the light. The small rectangular photo showed Ellen's face, her gray hair neatly styled, a practiced smile. And behind her right shoulder, barely visible unless you were looking for it, the blurred outline of a figure. The recording continued. I told her to stay with me for a few days, that I'd come get her in the morning. She agreed, but when I arrived, she was gone. And that photo, that damn family photo, was different again. The people weren't in the background anymore. They were standing with us, among us, like they'd always been part of the picture. I had that photo too, the last known image of the Mercer family reunion. 23 family members and 11 strangers, all arranged on the cabin steps, smiling at the camera. The strangers' faces still slightly blurred but distinctly present, standing beside family members, an arm around a shoulder here, a hand resting on a back there, integrated so naturally that if you didn't know the family personally, you'd never question their presence. The most disturbing element was Ellen Mercer herself. In the original photo, she sat front and center, the family matriarch smiling broadly. In this final iteration, she stood slightly apart from the group at the edge of the frame, and the tall, thin figure that had been pointing at her in the previous version now stood directly behind her, one pale hand visible on her shoulder. Ellen's case remained open but inactive. No leads, no body, no evidence of what happened to her, just a photograph that somehow changed over time, adding faces that shouldn't exist. 3 weeks after Ellen's disappearance, Diane Mercer called me in a panic. The photo had changed again. Now Ellen was standing fully beside the tall figure, her expression no longer a smile but something vacant, distant. And the figure had clarity, now a man in dated clothing, his features gaunt but his eyes sharp and focused directly on the camera, directly on the viewer. 2 days later, Diane Mercer disappeared as well. I pulled the most recent photograph from the file, the one recovered from Diane's home after she vanished. The Mercer family reunion, now showing 21 original family members, 11 strangers, and Ellen Mercer, all arranged on the cabin steps. Diane now stands at the edge of the frame, her expression matching her mother's vacant stare, a pale hand visible on her shoulder. The office is quiet save for the soft hum of the lights and the occasional tick of the wall clock. I should go home. It's well past midnight and I've been staring at these photos for hours. But something keeps me here, examining each face, each detail, looking for some explanation that makes sense in a world of logic and reason. As I begin to pack up the file, my phone buzzes with a text message. It's from my sister. Got the family photos developed from Mom's birthday last week. Something weird with them. Can you come look? Attached is an Image A group photo from my mother's 70th birthday celebration. My family gathered around a cake-laden table, all smiling at the camera, and at the very edge of the frame, barely visible but unmistakably there, stands a blurred figure I don't recognize. I stare at my phone screen, a chill creeping up my spine despite the warmth of the office. Then, with trembling fingers, I reach for the Mercer file again. I need to look more closely at those faces among the trees. I need to see if I recognize any of them, because I can't shake the feeling that soon, very soon, they'll be looking for me too. Story 6. I still remember the first time I set foot in the Blackwood estate. It was late October, when the New England air carried that distinctive crispness that makes your lungs feel clean and your mind alert. The mansion stood at the end of a winding gravel driveway, framed by ancient oak trees whose branches reached toward the structure like gnarled fingers. The realtor had called it a property with history, but as I would soon discover, those words barely scratched the surface of what waited within those walls. My job as a historical property assessor often brought me to places with stories to tell. This Victorian mansion, with its weathered brick facade and ornate trim work, seemed like just another assignment. The owner had passed away months earlier, an elderly woman with no heirs who had lived in isolation for decades. The county wanted the property evaluated before putting it up for auction. The key was heavy brass, cold against my palm as I slid it into the lock. The door swung open with surprising ease, no dramatic creak or resistance, just a gentle whisper of wood against wood. Inside, the air was still but not stale, as if the house had been waiting, breathing softly in anticipation of a visitor. My footsteps echoed on the hardwood floor of the entrance hall. Dust motes danced in the thin beams of afternoon light that filtered through partially drawn curtains. The interior was in remarkably good condition, antique furniture draped in white sheets, crystal chandeliers hanging like frozen waterfalls from the high ceilings. Everything had been maintained with meticulous care. I moved from room to room, taking notes, photographing architectural details, documenting the condition of the plaster moldings and period fixtures. The kitchen still held dishes in the cabinets, arranged with perfect symmetry. The dining room table was set for a meal that would never be served, complete with tarnished silver and delicate china plates. It was in the library that I first heard it, my name, whispered so softly that I almost convinced myself it was just the house settling, or perhaps the wind finding its way through some unseen gap in the window panes. Elena. I froze, my pencil hovering above my notepad. I held my breath, listening intently. Nothing but silence responded. I shook my head, attributing the sound to my imagination, to the natural uneasiness that comes from being alone in an empty house with too much history. The library itself was a treasure, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves filled with leather-bound volumes, many first editions worth a small fortune. I made a note to recommend a proper appraisal of the collection. As I ran my fingers along the spines, I noticed something odd. Many of the books were about local history, genealogy, and family records. Some had been marked with thin silk ribbons, the pages dog-eared at entries that seemed random at first glance. I continued my assessment, moving upstairs. The second floor contained 5 bedrooms, each dressed in different colors and styles, yet all maintaining the same immaculate preservation. It was as if the house existed in a pocket of time, untouched by the decay that should have claimed it years ago. Then I heard it again. Elena. This time the whisper seemed to come from above me. My heart quickened, but my rational mind insisted there must be a logical explanation. Perhaps someone else was in the house, another assessor, or someone from the county, but I had been told I would be working alone. At the end of the hallway, a narrow door led to what I assumed was the attic. Against my better judgment, I turned the handle and pushed it open. A steep staircase stretched upward into darkness. I reached for my flashlight, clicked it on, and began to climb. The attic was spacious, the ceiling following the slope of the roof with exposed beams that looked like the ribs of some great beast. Unlike the rest of the house, this space felt lived in. There were signs of recent habitation, a desk with a chair pulled out, papers scattered across its surface, and walls covered in photographs. My blood ran cold as the beam of my flashlight swept across the images. They were all of me. Me walking to my car outside my apartment building. Me grocery shopping at the farmer's market 3 towns over. Me having coffee at my favorite cafe. Me sitting alone at my desk late at night, working through case files. Some were taken from across the street, others through windows, and some from angles that seemed impossible, as if someone had been in the room with me. The photographs spanned years, documenting a life I thought was private, my life. In the center of the room sat an old leather-bound book, open to a page with my name written in elegant script at the top. Below it was a family tree, tracing a lineage I didn't recognize, connecting names and dates across generations. And at the bottom of the page, in the same careful handwriting, the last Blackwood heir. I approached the desk with trembling hands and picked up a yellowed envelope addressed to me. Inside was a letter dated 3 months ago, just before the elderly woman's death. "My dearest Eleanor," it began, "by the time you read this, I will be gone. You don't know me, but I have watched over you your entire life. You are the last of our line, though your mother took you away and changed your name to hide you from our family's curse." The letter detailed a history of tragedy, mysterious deaths, disappearances, and whispers of something dark that had haunted the Blackwood family for generations. The woman claimed to be my great-aunt, and according to her, I was the last surviving descendant. "The house has been waiting for you," the letter continued. "It knows your name, it has always known, and now that I am gone, it will call to you, draw you in, and claim you as it has claimed all Blackwoods before you." As I read those words, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. The whisper came again, this time from everywhere and nowhere at once. "Eleanor, welcome home." I dropped the letter and spun around, searching for the source of the voice. The attic door slammed shut with a heavy thud. I rushed to it, pulled at the handle, but it wouldn't budge. Panic rose in my throat as I pounded against the wood, calling for help that wouldn't come. Then slowly the photographs began to fall from the walls, one by one, floating to the floor like autumn leaves. As each image settled on the ground, I noticed they were changing, aging, darkening, the paper yellowing before my eyes. And in each photo, my image was fading, becoming transparent, as if I were being erased from existence. The whispering grew louder, no longer just my name, but a chorus of voices, speaking words I couldn't quite understand. The desk lamp flickered on by itself, casting long shadows across the room. In its dim light, I saw that the family tree in the open book was changing too, branches extending, names appearing and disappearing, until my name sat alone at the bottom of the page. I sank to the floor, surrounded by the fading photographs of my life, and felt the house settle around me, embracing me with its ancient walls and forgotten stories. There was no escape, there never had been. The house had called me home, just as the letter promised it would. That was 3 months ago. I live in the Blackwood mansion now. I've learned its secrets, read through the family records, and understood the nature of our curse. I've accepted my place in this house that knows my name. Sometimes when I walk through the silent rooms at night, I catch glimpses of those who came before me, shadows moving just beyond my peripheral vision, whispers in languages I shouldn't understand but somehow do. And sometimes I see new photographs appearing on the attic walls, images of strangers going about their daily lives, unaware they're being watched. Each one bears a name, written in my handwriting, though I have no memory of taking the pictures or labeling them. The house has chosen them just as it once chose me, and soon, very soon, it will begin to whisper their names, calling them home to the Blackwood estate where I will be waiting. Because that's how the curse works, that's how it always works. The house speaks your name, and eventually you answer its call. Story 7. The blueprints for the hotel were clear, 30 rooms all accounted for. But one night, the maid found a door at the end of the hallway that hadn't been there before. Inside was a fully furnished suite with a suitcase bearing her own initials. I remember the first time I visited the Blackwood Hotel. The building stood like a silent sentinel against the backdrop of rolling hills, its Victorian architecture a stark contrast to the modern development surrounding it. The late afternoon light filtered through the tall windows, casting long shadows across the polished marble floor of the lobby. There was something about the place that felt both inviting and unsettling, a contradiction I couldn't quite place my finger on. I was there to investigate what the local police had classified as a disturbance, though the desk clerk who had called it in used a different word. Anomaly. Not the typical language of a witness, but then again, nothing about this case would prove typical. Maria found it during her evening rounds, the hotel manager explained as we walked down the corridor of the third floor. His name was Lawrence Hastings, a man in his 60s with careful eyes and practiced composure. His voice remained steady, but I noticed his hand trembling slightly as he adjusted his tie. She's worked here for 15 years, never had any issues before. The corridor stretched before us, wallpapered in a subtle floral pattern that had faded with time. Brass sconces cast a warm amber glow every few feet, illuminating the numbered doors, 25, 26, 27. The blueprints are original to the building, Lawrence continued, the soft tap of his Oxfords on the carpet creating a metronome-like rhythm. My father purchased this place in 1982, renovated it extensively. I've overseen every repair, every modification since I took over in 2007. A pause. There have always been 30 rooms, no more, no less. We reached the end of the hallway where the corridor took a right turn. According to the floor plan Lawrence had shown me downstairs, this corner should house room 30, followed by a utility closet and then the emergency stairwell. Instead, beyond room 30, there was another door, unnumbered. Its dark mahogany finish looked freshly polished compared to the others, the brass handle gleaming under the sconce light. "This is it," Lawrence whispered, his voice carrying an edge of disbelief even days after the discovery. "It wasn't here last week. I would stake my reputation on it." I removed a pair of latex gloves from my pocket, the soft snap as I pulled them on echoing slightly in the quiet hallway. The handle turned smoothly under my grip, no resistance, no sound. The door swung inward. The room beyond defied explanation. Unlike the tasteful but clearly updated decor of the rest of the hotel, this room appeared frozen in time, a perfect preservation of early 1960s luxury. A king-sized bed dominated the space, covered in an emerald green bedspread. Heavy brocade curtains framed windows that, according to the building's exterior, couldn't possibly exist. A crystal decanter of amber liquid sat on a sideboard, two glasses beside it, one bearing a faint lipstick mark on the rim. "Everything was exactly like this when Maria found it," Lawrence said, remaining in the doorway as I stepped inside. The air felt different here, cooler, with a faint scent of lavender and cigarette smoke, except for the suitcase. My eyes followed his gesture to a vintage leather suitcase resting at the foot of the bed. The leather was worn at the corners but well maintained, the brass fixtures tarnished with age. And there, embossed on a small tag, were the initials MLC. Maria Louise Cortez, Lawrence confirmed before I could ask. "She's worked here since 2009, born in 1987. He swallowed. "This suitcase is at least 60 years old." I approached it carefully, aware of each creak in the floorboards beneath the plush carpet. The clasp opened with a soft click that seemed to hang in the air. Inside, neatly folded women's clothing, blouses, skirts, undergarments, all in a style consistent with the early 1960s. A small jewelry case contained a pearl necklace and matching earrings, a leather-bound journal, and a photograph. The image showed a young woman standing in front of the Blackwood Hotel. Her smile was bright, her posture confident in a tailored dress and pillbox hat. Though the photo was in black and white, there was no mistaking the resemblance. The woman could have been Maria Cortez's twin. On the back, written in faded blue ink, Margaret Louise Collins, first day at Blackwood, May 12, 1962. I closed the suitcase gently. my mind racing through possibilities, each more unlikely than the last. Have you located any records of a Margaret Collins working here in the 60s? Lawrence nodded, his expression grave. That's what delayed my call to the police. I wanted to be certain before sounding crazy. Our records show she was hired as a maid in 1962, reported missing in August of that same year, never found. The soft ticking of a clock drew my attention to the nightstand, an analog alarm clock, its hands frozen at 11:47. I moved toward the bathroom, pushing the door open slowly. Everything was immaculate, towels folded with hospital corners, soap unwrapped but unused in its dish. The mirror above the sink reflected my cautious expression. "Maria won't come back to work," Lawrence said, his voice barely audible from the doorway. She handed in her resignation the morning after, said she couldn't sleep knowing. He didn't finish the thought. As I turned to leave the bathroom, something caught my eye. The mirror's reflection showed a door behind me that wasn't there when I entered, a closet door, slightly ajar. I spun around, heart quickening despite my training. The door was there, a sliver of darkness visible through the gap. With measured steps, I approached and pulled it open. The closet was empty except for a hotel maid's uniform hanging on a single wire hanger. Black dress, white apron, perfectly pressed. A name tag pinned to the breast pocket read Margaret. Beneath it, on the closet floor, sat a single high-heeled shoe, its mate nowhere to be found. Over the next 3 days, I interviewed everyone connected to the hotel. Current staff, former employees we could locate, the children and grandchildren of the original owners. I combed through building permits, renovation records, newspaper archives. The story of Margaret Collins emerged in fragments, a young woman from a small town seeking independence in the city, well liked by guests and colleagues, romantically involved with someone her friends described only as a married man of means. Then suddenly gone without a trace. What I couldn't find was any record of the room's construction. No permit, no invoice for materials or labor. According to every document, that section of the hallway ended with room 30, a utility closet, and the stairwell. The room simply didn't exist until it did. On the 4th night, I returned to the hotel alone. The digital recorder in my pocket captured the sound of my footsteps as I made my way down the 3rd floor corridor, 25, 26, 27. My flashlight beam swept across the numbered doors, casting elongated shadows on the opposing wall. The door at the end of the hallway, the impossible door, stood waiting. This time when I turned the handle and stepped inside, the room had changed. The bed was unmade, the emerald coverlet pulled back as if someone had recently risen. The glass with the lipstick mark was now on the nightstand, empty. The closet door stood wide open, the uniform gone. And there on the bed lay a hotel maid's name tag. Not Margaret's, a new one bearing the name Maria. The alarm clock on the nightstand ticked steadily, its hands approaching 11:47. I backed out of the room slowly, pulling the door closed behind me. Through the crack, just before it latched shut, I heard a woman's soft humming, an old song my grandmother used to sing, and the gentle sound of water running in the bathroom sink. By morning, the door was gone. The wall at the end of the hallway showed no sign that an opening had ever existed, just uninterrupted floral wallpaper leading to the utility closet and stairwell beyond. Lawrence Hastings refused to set foot on the 3rd floor again. Within a month, he had sold the hotel to a developer who planned to demolish the building and erect luxury condominiums in its place. The case file remains open, classified as unsolved. The digital recorder from that night contains 3 hours of silence, followed by the sound of my footsteps leaving the room, a door closing, and then at exactly 11, 47 according to the timestamp, a woman's voice whispering, "It always makes room for one more." The blueprints for the Blackwood Hotel still show 30 rooms, all accounted for. The demolition has been delayed indefinitely due to permit issues. And sometimes, when the night staff makes their rounds, they report hearing footsteps on the third floor, the soft, measured pace of someone looking for a door that isn't there anymore. Or perhaps isn't there yet. Story 8. The evening air hung heavy with late autumn moisture as I walked down the quiet suburban street. Fallen leaves clung to the soles of my shoes, their gentle crunch punctuating each step like a metronome marking time. I'd been assigned to this case 3 weeks ago, but tonight felt different. The street lamps cast long, distorted shadows across neatly trimmed lawns, and the windows of the houses reflected amber light back into the darkness. House number 47 stood apart from its neighbors, not in any obvious way. The lawn was maintained, the paint was fresh, the curtains were drawn just like any other home on Maple Drive. Yet something about it pulled at my attention like a black hole bends light. This was where Edward Thorne had lived. This was where, according to our records, he had spoken to shadows. I paused at the edge of the driveway, feeling the weight of my notepad in my jacket pocket. The cool metal of my flashlight pressed against my thigh through the fabric of my pants. 3 weeks of interviews, evidence collection, and endless paperwork had led me here, back to where it all began, not to find answers necessarily, but to understand the questions. Edward Thorne had lived alone for 17 years after his wife passed. Neighbors described him as quiet but pleasant. He would wave when collecting his mail, occasionally chat about the weather, but mostly kept to himself. A retired accountant with no children, his routines were as predictable as the phases of the moon. Every morning at 7:15 he would walk to Brewster's Coffee 2 blocks away, order a medium black coffee, and read the newspaper for exactly 43 minutes before walking home. The barista, Melissa, had been the first to notice something was wrong. Edward hadn't come in for his coffee for 3 consecutive days. This had never happened before, not in the 8 years she'd worked there. On the 4th day, she called the police. I slowly walked up the driveway, my footsteps impossibly loud in the evening stillness. The front door still had crime scene tape across it, though our technicians had finished processing the scene days ago. I ducked under it, unlocked the door with the key provided by property management, and stepped inside. The house smelled of dust and faint cleaning chemicals, standard procedure after death investigations. I flicked on my flashlight rather than the house lights, preferring the narrow beam that highlighted details while leaving others in darkness. Sometimes shadows tell you more than what's illuminated. "You brought us here." That's what the neighbor, Mrs. Calloway, had heard through the wall they shared. At first, she thought Edward had finally gotten a visitor or perhaps was on the phone, but then she heard it again louder, "You brought us here." Mrs. Calloway said the voice didn't sound like Edward's. It was deeper, resonant in a way that made her teacup vibrate slightly on her side table. I moved through the living room, my flashlight beam revealing a meticulously organized space. Books arranged by height and color on shelves. Remote control perfectly aligned with the edge of the coffee table. Everything in its place except for the recliner, which was turned at an odd angle, facing the corner of the room rather than the television. The official report listed Edward Thorne's death as natural causes. Heart failure. A not unexpected end for a 78-year-old man with a history of cardiac issues. What the report didn't explain was why Edward had moved his chair to face an empty corner, or why he had covered every mirror in the house with bed sheets, or why he had written the same phrase 17 times on a legal pad found on his lap, "They only come when I'm alone." In the kitchen, my beam played across clean countertops and empty sink. The The refrigerator hummed softly. Someone had forgotten to empty it after the investigation concluded. I opened it to find neatly organized containers, each labeled with contents and date. Edward had been preparing meals for the week ahead. He hadn't expected to die. I moved down the hallway toward the bedroom where Edward had been found. The floorboards creaked beneath my weight, a sound that seemed to linger longer than it should. The bedroom door was partially open, and I pushed it gently with my fingertips, watching it swing inward to reveal the space beyond. The bed was still made, hospital corners precise and unwrinkled. Edward hadn't died in his sleep. According to the first responders, they found him in the armchair by the window, slumped forward but with his eyes open. On the windowsill beside him, 7 small stones arranged in a perfect circle. Detective Morrow, my partner on this case, had dismissed the stones as an old man's eccentricity. "People get weird when they live alone too long," he'd said with a shrug, but something about their placement nagged at me. Everything else in Edward's life had been rectilinear, organized at right angles and straight lines. Why a circle? I approached the window and ran my fingers along the sill. The stones were in evidence now, but I could still see the faint dust outline where they had sat. Through the glass, streetlights cast long fingers of illumination across the backyard. The shadows between these fingers seemed darker than they should be, more substantial somehow. Mrs. Calloway had mentioned one other thing during our interview, something I hadn't included in my official report. "The night before they found him," she'd said, leaning close as if sharing a secret, "I heard him talking to someone, but it wasn't like a normal conversation. It was like he was answering questions only he could hear, and he kept saying, 'I don't know what you want,' over and over." I turned away from the window and swept my flashlight across the room. The beam caught something I hadn't noticed before, a small desk in the corner, its surface bare except for a single manila folder. I approached slowly, aware of the sound of my breathing in the quiet room. The folder contained newspaper clippings, yellowed with age, all from the same week, 17 years ago, all about the unexpected death of Alina Thorne, Edward's wife, heart failure, the articles said, found in her armchair by the window. The medical examiner had ruled it natural causes. Beneath the clippings was a photograph of Alina and Edward standing in front of this very house. They were smiling, his arm around her shoulders, but what caught my attention was the background, specifically the window of what I now knew to be the bedroom. In the glass was a reflection, distorted but distinct, a figure standing between the photographer and the couple, a figure that cast no shadow on the sun-drenched lawn. I placed the photograph back in the folder with hands that weren't quite steady. As I did, I noticed writing on the inside of the folder, spidery handwriting that trailed down the cardboard in an uneven line. They came for Alina first. They spoke from the shadows until she listened. Now they speak to me. They say I brought them here, but I don't remember how. They say soon I'll understand. They say soon I'll join her. I closed the folder and stepped back, suddenly aware of how the shadows in the room seemed to have deepened around me. The streetlight outside flickered once, twice, then stabilized. The case of Edward Thorne was officially closed. Natural causes, no evidence of foul play, no reason to dig deeper. Yet as I stood in that quiet room, I couldn't shake the feeling that something important had been missed. Some connection that would explain the stones, the covered mirrors, the chair facing the corner. I left the house shortly after, locking the door behind me and ducking back under the crime scene tape. The night had grown colder, and I zipped my jacket against the chill. As I walked to my car, I glanced back at the house. For just a moment, so briefly I would later convince myself I'd imagined it, I saw a figure standing at the bedroom window, a silhouette that seemed to raise its hand in greeting, or perhaps warning. 3 days later, a young couple purchased the house at 47 Maple Drive. A good deal, their realtor told them. Priced to sell quickly due to the previous owner's passing. The wife mentioned to neighbors that she loved how quiet the street was, especially at night. The husband started renovating the bedroom immediately, removing the armchair by the window, installing new blinds, replacing the old desk in the corner. 2 weeks after moving in, the wife mentioned to the same neighbors that sometimes in the evenings she thought she heard someone whispering from the shadows in the corner of their bedroom. Her husband never heard it. She said it almost sounded like her name. I keep the manila folder in my desk drawer at the precinct. Sometimes, late at night when the office is empty and the overhead lights cast long shadows across my desk, I take it out and look at that photograph again. At the figure reflected in the window, at the shadows that don't align with the sun's angle. And sometimes, when I'm alone in my office late at night, I think I hear someone whisper my name from the darkened corners of the room. A voice that says, "You brought us here." I've started leaving the lights on when I sleep. I've considered covering my mirrors. The case of Edward Thorne remains officially closed, but in my mind it whispers from the shadows, waiting for me to listen, waiting for me to understand, waiting for me to join them. Story 9, it arrived on her doorstep, sealed with red wax and no return address. Inside was a letter written in her own handwriting detailing events she hadn't experienced yet, and at the bottom a warning, they're already watching. I still remember the weight of the case file in my hands when it first landed on my desk. The manila folder was thin, unusually so for a missing persons case, but there was something about it that felt heavier than its physical presence suggested. The quiet hum of the precinct's fluorescent lights provided a steady backdrop as I opened the file, the soft creak of the folder's spine breaking the stillness of the early morning hours. The victim's name was Eleanor Marsh, 34, a linguistics professor at the local university. Single, lived alone in a modest craftsman-style home on Willow Lane. No history of mental illness, no substance abuse issues, no known enemies. By all accounts, a woman who led a quiet, orderly life surrounded by books and research papers. The photograph clipped to the file showed a woman with thoughtful eyes behind tortoiseshell glasses, her smile reserved but genuine. I sipped my coffee, now lukewarm in the department-issued mug, and continued reading. The disappearance had been reported 3 days ago by a colleague when Eleanor failed to show up for her weekly lecture, something she had never done in her 7 years at the university. When officers performed the initial welfare check, they found her home undisturbed, her car in the driveway, her purse still hanging by the door. The only thing out of place was a single envelope lying open on her kitchen table. The letter inside had been written in what the initial officers described as her apparent handwriting, a fact later confirmed by a handwriting analyst. The contents described events that hadn't yet occurred, a series of seemingly unrelated incidents around town that, when pieced together, formed a pattern only visible to someone looking for it. And at the bottom, those 5 words that sent a chill through me, "They're already watching." I set the file down and stared at the clock on the wall, its second hand moving with mechanical precision. Outside my window, the city was beginning to wake up, street lamps still glowing against the early dawn. I had been assigned this case because of my experience with unusual disappearances, though nothing in my 15 years on the force had prepared me for a victim who appeared to predict her own vanishing. The following day I drove to Eleanor's neighborhood. Willow Lane was lined with mature trees that cast dappled shadows across neatly maintained lawns. Her house sat about halfway down the block, a blue Craftsman with a small front porch and carefully tended garden boxes beneath each window. Yellow police tape still crossed the front door, moving slightly in the gentle breeze. Inside, the house felt suspended in time. A half-empty cup of tea sat on the coffee table, a thin film formed on its surface. Books were stacked methodically on end tables and shelves, many marked with colorful sticky notes. The air carried the faint scent of lavender and old paper. I moved through the rooms with deliberate steps, listening to the old hardwood floors creak beneath my weight. In her study, I found a desk organized with near mathematical precision. Pens aligned, papers stacked at perfect right angles. The only sign of disruption was the drawer left slightly ajar. I slid it open fully, the wood runners making a soft whispering sound. Inside was a leather journal, its cover worn with use. I flipped it open, noting the precise, flowing handwriting that filled its pages. The journal entries were standard fare until about 3 weeks before her disappearance. Then the tone shifted. Alina wrote about feeling watched, about noticing the same car parked across from her office, about finding her office door unlocked when she was certain she had secured it. Small things, easily attributed to paranoia or forgetfulness, except for the methodical way she documented each incident. The final entry was dated 2 days before she went missing. The letter came today. My handwriting, my thoughts, but not my memory, events yet to unfold. Am I losing my mind, or is something else happening? If what it predicts is true, I don't have much time. I closed the journal and slipped it into an evidence bag, the plastic crinkling in the silence of the room. As I did, something caught my eye, a small tear in the wallpaper behind her desk. Pulling the desk forward revealed a narrow space between the wall and a built-in bookcase. Wedged into that gap was another envelope, identical to the one found on her kitchen table. My latex gloves made a slight squeaking sound as I carefully extracted the envelope and opened it. Inside was another letter in the same handwriting, but this one addressed to me specifically. Detective, by the time you find this, I will be gone, not by choice, but by necessity. The pattern is larger than you can imagine. Trust no one who shows undue interest in my case. Check the library basement archives, June 1987. The paper trembled slightly in my hands. How could she have known I would be assigned to her case? How could she have written a letter addressing me before she disappeared, before anyone knew she would vanish? I folded the letter carefully and added it to my evidence collection, my mind racing with possibilities, none of them comforting. The university library was a massive Gothic structure that loomed over the center of campus. Its basement archives were accessed through a heavy door, requiring special permission from the head librarian, a gray-haired woman named Ms. Pembroke, who regarded my badge with polite suspicion before reluctantly providing a key. "The archive's close at 4, she reminded me, her voice echoing slightly in the cavernous main hall. "Be sure to return the key before then." The basement air was cool and dry, preserved for the sake of the documents housed there. Fluorescent lights flickered to life as I flipped switches, illuminating long rows of metal shelving filled with boxes and bound periodicals. My footsteps echoed on the concrete floor as I made my way to the section marked 1987. June 1987. What had happened then that connected to Alina Marsh? I pulled box after box, the cardboard rough under my fingertips. Local newspapers, university publications, research papers. Nothing seemed immediately relevant until I opened a bound collection of the university newspaper, and a yellowed clipping fell out, not part of the bound edition, but placed there deliberately. The headline read, "Graduate Student Missing, Foul Play Suspected." The article detailed the disappearance of Catherine Wells, a 28-year-old linguistics doctoral candidate who had vanished without a trace from her apartment. The circumstances were eerily similar to Alina's case. No signs of struggle, personal belongings left behind, and reports that she had been acting strangely in the weeks before her disappearance. claiming she was being watched. Most disturbing was the grainy photograph accompanying the article. Though 37 years separated them, the resemblance between Catherine Wells and Alina Marsh was undeniable. They could have been sisters or even the same person. I checked the byline on the article, contributing reporter E. March, similar to Marsh but not quite the same. A coincidence, a pseudonym. The dim light made it difficult to read the smaller print beneath the article. I squinted, making out a faded editor's note. Catherine Wells' body was discovered 3 months after publication in an abandoned research facility outside city limits. Case remains unsolved. The soft sound of a door closing somewhere in the archives made me look up sharply. I had thought I was alone, but now footsteps echoed between the shelves, unhurried, deliberate. I slipped the article into my pocket and moved quietly toward the source of the sound, one hand resting on my holstered weapon. Between the shelves, shadows shifted. A figure stood at the far end of an aisle, features indistinct in the poor lighting. As I approached, they turned and moved deeper into the archives. I followed, calling out my identity as a police detective, but received no response. The figure always remained just at the edge of visibility, leading me deeper into the maze of shelving until I found myself in a section marked Restricted Collections. Here the air felt even colder. The figure had vanished, but a single box sat open on a reading table, a small desk lamp casting a pool of yellow light over its contents. Inside was a folder labeled Continuity Research Phase 2. The documents detailed experiments in what was described as temporal perception manipulation, scientific language that, as I worked through it, appeared to describe attempts to send information backward through time. The list of research subjects made my blood run cold. Catherine Wells' name appeared, as did 24 others spanning 4 decades. Each name had a date beside it, the date of their disappearance, and at the bottom of the list, added in fresh ink that hadn't had time to fully dry, Alina Marsh. The last page of the file was a photograph of a team of researchers from 1986. In the center stood a man identified as Dr. Howard Klein, project director. I had seen his face before he was now the university's current chancellor. As I reached for my phone to call for backup, it buzzed with an incoming text from an unknown number. "They're already watching you too, detective." I looked up sharply. Between the shelves, in the shadows beyond the reach of the desk lamp, I could make out the silhouette of a woman with tortoiseshell glasses, her finger pressed to her lips in a gesture of silence. Before I could reach her, she slipped away, leaving behind only the faint scent of lavender in the musty archive air. And in that moment, I understood why Alina Marsh had disappeared, not because she was a victim, but because she had discovered something she wasn't supposed to know. Something that connected her to Catherine Wells across decades. Something about time and perception that powerful people wanted to keep hidden. The case remains officially unsolved. Chancellor Klein denied any knowledge of the research project when questioned, and university records showed no Dr. Howard Klein ever employed there. The restricted archives suffered an unfortunate water damage incident the night after my visit, destroying any evidence I might have gathered. But sometimes on quiet nights when I'm reviewing old case files, I find notes in my own handwriting that I don't remember writing. Warnings about events yet to unfold. And occasionally I catch a glimpse of a woman with tortoiseshell glasses watching me from across the street before she vanishes into the crowd. The letter with no address changed everything, not just for Alina Marsh, but for me, because now I know time isn't what we think it is. And somewhere, somehow, Alina is still trying to warn us about what's coming. They're already watching. Story 10. The tale unfurls in the quiet corners of a town where the costume shop, its time running thin, decided to part ways with its old wares. Amidst the fading echoes of laughter and play, a woman stumbled upon a mask tucked away on a forgotten shelf, a mask with features so delicate yet unnervingly lifelike. The cashier's voice wavered as she placed it upon the counter, his words barely a whisper. "That's not ours." Perplexed, she sought a tag, but none greeted her gaze. With a nonchalant shrug, she carried it to her dwelling, and as the night wrapped its tendrils around the world, she stirred from slumber to a gentle rustle, a whisper of fabric in motion. The mask had vanished from its perch on the dresser, now perched upon her nightstand, its gaze fixed upon her with silent intent. Catherine Reed, the woman in question, was discovered by a concerned neighbor. The front door creaked ajar, allowing the morning light to cascade into the dimness of her abode. What was meant to be a book turned into a chilling scene etched in the neighbor's memory. Catherine lay still upon her bedroom floor, the mask nowhere to be seen. Detective Morgan arrived, her presence weaving a sense of dread into the room as forensics diligently captured the scene in flashes of light. The shutters danced in a rhythm against murmured conversations, the air thick with unspoken questions. No signs of forced entry, an officer jotted down, his gaze sweeping the room for clues unnoticed. A drawer slightly ajar, a glass with traces of lipstick on the nightstand, everything ordinary except for the life extinguished in the silence. The medical examiner, a bearer of grim news, struggled to ascertain the cause of Catherine's demise. No visible wounds, no signs of struggle, only an expression of terror etched into her features. The detective knelt, drawn to the frozen fear in Catherine's eyes. "Something scared her to death," she murmured, the weight of the unknown heavy upon her shoulders. Catherine, an art appraiser known for her keen eye, had a knack for spotting the inauthentic amidst the genuine. Her colleagues spoke of her precision, her unwavering dedication to truth. Could it be that this very talent had led her down a path of darkness? The enigma deepened as security footage from the costume shop unveiled a peculiar truth. The cashier's confusion was genuine, his call for the owner revealing a mask unknown to them, a mask that bore no place in their inventory. A visit to the now empty shop unearthed unsettling revelations from the owner, tales of mysterious origins tied to a deceased collector and strange occurrences following acquisitions from his estate sale. The threads of mystery intertwined as forensics uncovered microscopic fibers on Catherine's fingertips, fibers of a nature unknown, a blend of human hair and an unidentifiable organic substance. The investigation unfurled a tapestry of inexplicable deaths spanning decades, each victim linked by the acquisition of an otherworldly mask, each face etched with the same veil of terror. A retired detective, a guardian of forgotten truths, shared his knowledge, a ritual of soul transference hinted at by ancient symbols hidden within the masks. A breakthrough emerged from the shadows of Catherine's dwelling, a journal revealing her descent into a realm of fear and realization. The mask, a harbinger of dread, a watcher in the night, a vessel seeking new hosts to carry out its macabre purpose. The evidence stacked, the pieces of the puzzle aligning in a dance of despair. The cause of death uncovered extreme fear leading to cardiac arrest, a heart stilled by terror unimaginable. Yet the shadows held more secrets, a surveillance footage capturing a figure departing Catherine's abode, donned in a mask that mirrored her visage but moved with an unsettling mechanical grace. The hunt for the missing mask ensued, its trail growing cold until whispers surfaced of its reappearance in a distant vintage shop. By the time authorities arrived, it had slipped into new hands, leaving behind a trail of unanswered questions. The case, shrouded in enigma, remains a haunting chapter in the detective's career. Catherine's journal, a testament to a truth too bizarre for official records, rests within a drawer, a reminder of the darkness that lurks beyond the veil of normalcy. In the stillness of night, she startles awake, a sense of unease gripping her senses. She secures her abode, warding off the shadows that linger at the edge of perception, the mask's malevolent presence a whisper in the back of her mind. For the mask, ancient and hungry, waits in the shadows, biding its time until it finds another soul to ensnare in its cycle of dread. And when it does, another will awaken to the soft whisper of its approach, the empty eyes fixed upon them, a vessel yearning to claim what lies behind their gaze. Story 11. In the quiet hush of the night, the old library stood, its fate sealed to be erased from existence. The workers, shadows moving in the dim glow of their lanterns, were on the brink of completing their task when fate intervened. A stumble, a mere misstep, led one laborer to a revelation, a hidden latch nestled within the depths of a weathered bookshelf. With a gentle sigh, the latch surrendered, and the bookshelf parted like a curtain, unveiling a secret stage. Beyond the threshold lay a passage leading to a forgotten chamber untouched by time. The air hung heavy, pregnant with the whispers of the past, whispers that had long been silenced. Within that hidden room, devoid of life or comfort, a solitary chair stood sentinel in the center, its legs bolted firmly to the floor. And etched upon the walls, a haunting mantra echoed in the darkness, "I am still here." The call went out, echoing through the night, a call for the authorities, for those who tread the thin line between truth and shadows. Detective Morgan Walsh, a seasoned guardian of the night, arrived to behold a scene unlike any other in his storied career. His footsteps echoed in the chamber, his flashlight carving through the darkness like a knife through silk, revealing the cryptic message that adorned the walls. "Secure the scene," Walsh commanded, his voice a whisper that reverberated in the confined space. "Let no one disturb this place until the hands of forensics have woven their tapestry of truth." The history of the building whispered tales of a bygone era, of a family ensnared in tragedy and secrets. The library, once a jewel in the crown of the Harrington dynasty, had been bequeathed to the public following the mysterious vanishing of Rebecca, the daughter lost to the shadows. The void she left behind, a mystery unsolved, lingered like a ghost in the hallways of the past. As the forensic alchemists delved into the enigmatic chamber, their discoveries painted a macabre portrait of suffering and confinement. Strands of hair, fibers of cloth, and droplets of blood whispered of a captive's plight, a struggle against unseen chains that bound the soul. Walsh, a seeker of truth in a realm of shadows, delved deeper into the tapestry of the Harrington legacy. The timing of the library's donation gnawed at his mind, a puzzle piece waiting to be fitted into the mosaic of truth. And as the layers of deception peeled away, a sinister design emerged. The contractor, a shadowy figure in the Harrington saga, had crafted the hidden room with meticulous care, a chamber of secrets veiled in plain sight. Maxwell Harrington, the patriarch with blood on his hands, had orchestrated a symphony of deceit, weaving a web to ensnare his own flesh and blood. The truth, a shard of shattered glass glinting in the dark, revealed itself in due time. Rebecca, the lost daughter, had not fled into the night, but had been ensnared in a gilded cage of her uncle's making. The chair, a throne of torment, bore witness to her anguish, her defiance echoing in the silent screams etched upon the walls. As Maxwell's facade crumbled, the truth spilled forth like a river of sorrow, a confession tainted with the stain of betrayal, of greed, of a life snuffed out in the name of a tarnished legacy. The excavation, a dance with death beneath the floorboards, unearthed the bones of the lost daughter, a silent witness to the sins of the past. In the courtroom of reckoning, the scales of justice tipped in favor of the fallen, the echoes of a life lost finding solace in the hands of fate. The library, once destined for oblivion, now stood as a monument to the forgotten, a shrine of remembrance for the voiceless. And in the stillness of the night, a whisper lingered in the air, a whisper that carried the weight of truth and justice. "I am still here," it murmured, a promise fulfilled in the dance of shadows and light, a requiem for a lost soul finally at peace. Story 12. The inn was modest, outdated, a transient haven where guests lingered for just a night. The receptionist passed her the key with a peculiar glance. "Just avoid the final door on the left," he whispered. Intrigue tugged at her, urging her to explore. That evening, as she strolled through the dim corridor, she halted before it. The knob chilled her hand. The door appeared ordinary until she pressed her ear against it. A presence exhaled from the other side. Detective Morgan Reed swept away drowsiness, slipping under the yellow tape barring the crime scene entrance. The stench hit her first coppery and acrid, a scent she knew too well. Blood had seeped into the worn carpet, staining the already shadowy design to a deep hue. The room contradicted itself: spotless bathroom, undisturbed bed, and then the ghastly sight in between. A young woman's form lay sprawled on the floor, her golden locks splayed like a halo. Her vacant gaze met the ceiling, frozen in a silent scream or shock. Reed knelt beside the victim, cautious not to disturb the evidence markers scattered around. "Third one this season," remarked the forensic expert, his tone devoid of emotion as he documented the scene. "Same calling card as the others." Reed nodded in silence. The victim wore elegant attire, out of place in this forsaken lodge. A high-end purse lay open on the nightstand, contents untouched. This was no robbery. A different motive drove this killer. The motel manager lingered anxiously in the doorway, his complexion pallid. "She checked in alone, paid in cash. I never imagined," his voice faltered. "The maid discovered her during cleaning." Reed studied the room anew. No signs of forced entry, no defensive wounds on the victim. She had either welcomed her assailant inside or already known them. Back at the precinct, Reed pinned photos to the board. 3 women, all resembling one another, all found in rundown motels. Speculation brewed in the press. Whispers of a serial offender echoed through the town. "The autopsy report is in," Detective Hayes announced, dropping a file on Reed's desk. "Death by manual strangulation. No DNA under her nails. No signs of sexual assault." Reed furrowed her brow. "This is personal, not merely predatory." Days melded into one another as the investigation deepened. Surveillance footage from the inn revealed nothing amiss. The victim, identified as Elaine Werner, was a meticulous financial analyst with no known foes. Her acquaintances described her as cautious, precise, not someone who would willingly stay in such a place. A breakthrough emerged during Reed's interview with Werner's sister. She mentioned a man from her workplace, the sister disclosed, hands trembling around her cup. She was secretive about him, said he was complicated. "Married, I think," Reed leaned in. "Did she mention a name?" "She called him C, that's all she said." The focus shifted to Werner's office. Colleagues depicted her as reserved, professional. None were aware of any relationship. However, a business card was discovered in Werner's desk calendar. Charles Emerson, Senior Vice President. Emerson maintained a flawless facade during questioning, concerned, cooperative, keeping his distance. His alibi appeared solid, dinner with his spouse and another couple, yet something in his gaze unsettled Reed. "Did you have a personal relationship with Elaine Werner outside of work?" Reed inquired casually. A flicker crossed Emerson's features, fleeting enough for most to miss. "Strictly professional." Later that week, partial fingerprints from Werner's purse were matched to Emerson. When confronted, his facade crumbled. "We were involved," he confessed, "but I ended it. She threatened to expose me to my wife." "A reason to kill her?" Reed probed. Emerson's demeanor hardened. "I never set foot in that motel." However, the motel records painted a different picture. A credit card charge for the neighboring room paid with a corporate card linked to Emerson's company. Upon searching that room, a concealed camera was uncovered in the shared vent. The evidence accumulated. Fibers from Emerson's distinctive suit matched those found on Werner's body. His DNA was present on a glass in her room. Examination of his home computer unveiled similar recordings of the prior victims. A pattern emerged. Emerson targeted women resembling his spouse in her youth. He lured them to designated motels, always selecting the room next to the last door on the left, a room equipped with surveillance gear. After recording their encounters, he returned to eradicate the evidence, the women themselves. In the interrogation chamber, Emerson's facade finally cracked. "They threatened to ruin everything," he murmured. "My reputation, my marriage, my life." The trial was swift but gripping. 3 families observed as justice unfolded in the sterile courtroom. Emerson displayed no remorse, maintaining the impassive demeanor that served him well in the business realm. The judge sentenced him to life imprisonment without parole. As officers escorted him away, Reed met his gaze. For an instant she glimpsed something beyond his mask, not compassion, but its absence. A void where empathy should have resided. The media dubbed it the door on the left case. Psychologists dissected Emerson's psyche. Fans of true crime analyzed every detail, yet for Reed the case never truly concluded. Sometimes, wandering through hotel corridors, she found herself counting doors, pondering the secrets that might linger behind them. In the evidence vault secluded from public view, 3 identical room keys remain labeled and archived. Tangible reminders that certain doors, once opened, can never be shut again. Story 13. The tale of the new dwellers began with what seemed like innocent peeling wallpaper. But as they delicately removed layer after layer, a hidden narrative unraveled before their eyes. Inked onto the walls repeatedly was a singular name. The same name filling every crevice, scrawled in a frantic, uneven hand. It didn't belong to the previous occupants. It wasn't documented anywhere. Yet a search online unearthed a lone result, a decades-old missing persons report, and the chilling twist. The woman in the photograph bore an uncanny resemblance to the one who had handed them the keys to their new abode. Michael and Sarah Klein had no immediate plans to renovate the Victorian-era house. The allure of the charming old dwelling, with its surprisingly affordable price tag, and the enigmatic previous owner, a graceful lady with silver-streaked dark locks, had prompted the purchase. The couple found themselves captivated by the home's history, its intricate woodwork and lofty ceilings whispering tales of yesteryears. It all began with a faint water stain in the master bedroom. Sarah noticed a yellowing patch seeping through the floral wallpaper. When Michael probed the area with his fingers, the paper gave way, revealing yet another layer beneath. Intrigued, they gingerly peeled back the damaged section. The first revealed patterns from the 1970s. Below that, striped paper from an earlier era. But as they delved deeper, an unexpected sight emerged on the third layer, a name. Dark ink on faded paper. Not random markings, but a name, Eleanor Winters, repeated endlessly, the handwriting growing increasingly frantic and erratic across the wall. "Who is Eleanor Winters?" Sarah murmured, her fingertips tracing the manic script. The discovery sent shivers down their spines. Later that evening, Michael sat at the kitchen island, laptop aglow, scouring property records. The house had changed hands multiple times over the years. Yet no trace of Eleanor Winters appeared in any documentation. The woman who had sold them the house was registered as Margaret Cavendish. Sarah joined him, clutching a mug of coffee. Try searching just the name. The internet search yielded scarce results until they stumbled upon a digitized newspaper article archived from decades past. Eleanor Winters, aged 27, reported missing during the winter. The black and white photograph depicted a young woman with dark hair and striking eyes that mirrored those of Margaret Cavendish, their home's previous owner. "This article is from 30 years ago," Michael murmured, barely audible over the hum of the refrigerator. Margaret would be around the right age now, but Sarah swallowed hard. The missing woman's case remained unsolved, no body recovered, no suspect identified. Their initial curiosity morphed into an all-consuming fixation. Sarah reached out to former homeowners, retracing steps through county records. Renovations took a back seat as they dedicated evenings to their impromptu investigation. They discovered that Margaret Cavendish had only owned the house for a brief 7 months before selling it to them, a departure from the usual extensive paperwork and inspections they had encountered. The retired detective assigned to the cold case recalled the investigation vividly when Michael managed to locate him. Eleanor Winters was reported missing by her roommate, no signs of struggle at her apartment, her abandoned car found near the highway. The case went cold rapidly, no witnesses, no evidence of foul play, just vanished. Michael hesitated before inquiring, "Did you ever interview a Margaret Cavendish?" A heavy silence hung on the line. "No recollection of that name. Why do you ask?" Upon sharing their findings and providing photos of both women, the retired detective pledged to make inquiries. Shortly after, a detective from the current force reached out, seeking permission to scrutinize the wall, their home transformed into an active crime scene. Forensic teams meticulously documented and extracted portions of the wallpaper. Analysis revealed the ink dated back approximately 30 years. Handwriting experts compared the wall inscriptions to samples of Eleanor's handwriting from old journals provided by her family, yielding inconclusive results. Simultaneously, Sarah stumbled upon a concealed compartment beneath the bedroom closet's floorboards. Inside lay Eleanor Winters' driver's license alongside various identification cards bearing different names. Each card depicted the same face with subtle alterations, varying hair hues, glasses, expressions. The final ID, Margaret Cavendish, aligned with their home's cellar. Attempts to locate Margaret using the forwarding address she had given proved futile. Her phone number disconnected. The bank account that received their payment had been closed. Margaret Cavendish had vanished, akin to Eleanor Winters decades earlier. The course of the investigation shifted dramatically with a groundbreaking revelation. DNA analysis of hair strands retrieved from deep within the wall matched Eleanor Winters. However, fingerprints lifted from the writing itself matched an entirely different profile, a psychiatric patient named Rebecca Eldridge, institutionalized shortly after Eleanor's disappearance. Rebecca suffered from severe dissociative identity disorder, repeatedly escaping the institution over the years. Her medical records unveiled a chilling detail. One of her documented alter egos identified as Eleanor. The scrawled name served as Rebecca's desperate attempt to cling onto reality, to recollect her true self amidst the fabricated personas. The wall had become both a confessional and a prison, embodying her fractured psyche. Michael and Sarah observed from their porch as forensic teams excavated specific sections of their backyard, guided by ground-penetrating radar detecting anomalies below the surface. The cold case had taken an unexpected turn. Remains unearthed from the garden belonged to Eleanor Winters. Rebecca Eldridge, known to the couple as Margaret Cavendish, was eventually apprehended attempting to cross the border under yet another alias. Confronted with evidence, the persona posing as Margaret crumbled, giving way to a different personality, one who confessed to Eleanor's murder in a fit of jealousy. The names on the wall served as both a memorial and a manifestation of guilt, transcribed by a fractured mind grappling to retain shreds of truth within itself. For Aliner's family, justice arrived 3 decades overdue. For Michael and Sarah, their dream dwelling became notorious, a footnote in true crime annals, forever etched as the house where the walls themselves bore witness to a tragic tale. Story 14. She gazed at her own reflection in the mirror, wiping away the steam that blurred the glass. Everything seemed normal at first glance, her face, her clothes, all as they should be. But a subtle unease crept in, growing with each passing moment. It started with a flicker in the corner of her eye, a movement that didn't belong to her. And then, as she turned away, her reflection remained motionless, observing her with an unsettling stillness. The enigma of Rebecca Thorne began in that quiet bathroom, setting off a chain of events that would baffle investigators and cast a shadow over the community for years to come. Living alone in a modest apartment nestled within a serene suburban enclave, Rebecca was known to her friends as a meticulous and reserved individual, a woman who preferred solitude but maintained a cordial relationship with her neighbors. Her days revolved around the structured world of data analysis at a mid-sized corporation, her existence dictated by routines and precision. Never did anyone suspect that she would find herself at the center of one of the most mystifying criminal investigations in recent memory. The first signs were subtle, easily dismissed. Objects within her home began to shift, a coffee mug relocated, books rearranged, her toothbrush out of place. Initially attributing these anomalies to fatigue from long hours spent poring over spreadsheets under harsh fluorescent lights, Rebecca brushed them off as mere lapses of memory. It wasn't until weeks passed and the disturbances persisted that she reached out to the authorities. Detective Marion Shaw received the initial report, viewing it as a matter more suited for mental health services than police intervention. Without concrete evidence of criminal activity, no broken locks, no missing items, no signs of forced entry, Shaw cataloged the complaint among her stack of non-urgent cases. It was a feeling of unease, she later recounted, a sense that something was amiss in her own home. But it was the incident with the bathroom mirror that altered the course of the investigation. During her subsequent interaction with the police, Rebecca recounted the eerie episode in vivid detail, the sensation of her reflection moving independently, the constant feeling of being watched even in solitude. This time she had proof, footage from a security camera she had installed, trained on her front door. The recording revealed a chilling revelation that sent shivers down the spines of seasoned officers. It showed Rebecca departing for work in the morning, only to have an exact replica of herself, using a key to access the apartment 20 minutes later. Forensic experts scrutinized the footage for any signs of tampering or digital manipulation, finding none. The intruder moved with a precision that mirrored Rebecca's every gesture, attire, and even her distinctive leather bag. Yet, according to time-stamped records from her workplace security system, Rebecca had already checked into her office across town. "We're facing a doppelganger scenario," Detective Shaw informed her superiors. "Someone who has meticulously studied Ms. Thorne and can replicate her with uncanny accuracy." As the investigation deepened, fingerprints within the apartment yielded only Rebecca's, and no foreign DNA was detected. Neighbors reported nothing out of the ordinary, only Rebecca's routine comings and goings. Mrs. Keller, a neighbor, mentioned an encounter where Rebecca failed to acknowledge her greeting upon returning home, an unusual occurrence, but not cause for alarm. Rebecca began documenting the disturbances in a journal, noting the multiplying changes within her home. Food vanished from her refrigerator without recollection, her computer displayed searches she had not initiated, and most unsettling were the self-portraits on her phone, images of herself with expressions that felt subtly askew, smiles too wide, eyes too intense. "I feel like I'm losing my mind," she confessed to Detective Shaw during their subsequent meeting. "Or perhaps someone is deliberately pushing me to the brink." The breakthrough arrived when a pattern emerged in the security footage. The doppelganger only infiltrated when Rebecca was absent for specific pre-scheduled appointments, therapy sessions, yoga classes, Sunday morning grocery runs. It was a calculated surveillance, a targeted infiltration into Rebecca's life. A forensic psychologist posited a theory of fixation, an individual fixated on assuming Rebecca's identity, living her life, and potentially aiming to supplant her entirely. Such cases, though rare, were documented in the annals of psychology, typically involving a perpetrator who had undergone a psychological rupture, fixating on a victim who represented coveted traits like stability, beauty, success, or normalcy. The focus of the investigation honed in on Lily Winters, a former colleague of Rebecca's who had been terminated due to escalating erratic behavior. Lily had worked closely with Rebecca, often remarking on their shared similarities. Post-dismissal, she had sent Rebecca a series of unnerving emails, suggesting a disturbing kinship between them. With a warrant in hand, Detective Shaw and her team scoured Lily's residence, unearthing a chilling revelation that transformed the case from perplexing to harrowing. One room in Lily's abode had been transformed into a shrine-like replica of Rebecca's bedroom, adorned with countless photographs capturing Rebecca's every move entering her home, socializing, shopping, each image taken without Rebecca's knowledge. A closet harbored duplicates of Rebecca's wardrobe, while a vanity displayed makeup brands identical to those favored by Rebecca, alongside meticulous notes on her mannerisms, speech patterns, and daily routines. Most disturbing were the practice videos, showcasing Lily mimicking Rebecca's gait, gestures, and expressions, with a progression from awkward mimicry to near-perfect replication. "She wanted to be me," whispered Rebecca upon witnessing the evidence, "not just imitate, but erase me." Forensic analysts uncovered sophisticated tools for crafting key replicas and cloning electronic access cards, indicative of an intricate system designed to shadow Rebecca's movements, including a calendar predicting her every move. What remained elusive was Lily's endgame. Journals recovered from Lily's residence contained erratic entries, oscillating between first and third person, often referring to Rebecca interchangeably as both me and her within the same paragraph. The final chilling entry read, "Soon, only one of us will remain the stronger version." As authorities moved to apprehend Lily, they were met with an empty residence, signs of a hasty departure evident, drawers left ajar, technology missing. A nationwide alert was issued, and Rebecca was relocated to a secure, surveilled safe house while all locations tied to her previous life underwent round-the-clock monitoring. Lily, however, remained elusive. The investigation took a chilling turn when a security guard at Rebecca's former workplace reported a peculiar sighting. Despite being under protective custody, Rebecca was spotted entering the building. Security footage corroborated the account. A figure identical to Rebecca, using a valid employee ID, had accessed the premises, rifled through her desk for 40 minutes, and exited. The revelation was stark. Lily hadn't fled. She had made her move, assuming Rebecca's identity, while the genuine Rebecca remained concealed. The case lingered open, casting a lingering shadow over those involved. Lily Winters remained at large, and Rebecca Thorne chose to forge a new identity, vanishing into an undisclosed sanctuary. Detective Shaw kept a photograph on her desk portraying two eerily similar women, Rebecca Thorne and Lily Winters, meticulously examining their features for distinctions, for the subtle nuances that set them apart. The true horror Shaw often imparted to young recruits lies not in resemblance, but in desire, the yearning to become another so fervently that one forfeits their essence in the pursuit. Our identity is not merely what we present to the world, but what we safeguard most vigilantly, and sometimes it takes a threat to realize its intrinsic value. In the eerie aftermath, the enigma of Rebecca Thorne and Lily Winters lingered, a chilling saga of identity, obsession, and the profound lengths one would go to become someone else. Story 15. The old house sat silently, its windows staring out like vacant eyes onto the quiet street. Whispers floated among the neighbors, tales of the young woman who had disappeared, leaving the house abandoned for years. When new tenants finally dared to step inside, they were met with a locked bedroom door, a mystery waiting to be unraveled. With a creak and a groan, the door yielded to their persistence, revealing a room frozen in time. The air inside hung heavy with dust, a stillness that belied an unsettling presence. The bed stood neatly made, the mirror gleamed without a speck of dust. But there on the desk, a solitary candle had burned itself out, its wax a frozen cascade of tears. In the dim light, they discovered a leather-bound notebook, pages filled with the elegant script of a woman named Elise Winters. She had vanished 5 years ago, her disappearance shrouded in shadows. Detective Morgan traced his fingers over her words, each stroke a whisper from the past, a plea for justice. Elise's meticulous handwriting told a story of late nights and hidden truths, of a world where numbers danced deceitfully and documents whispered lies. Her pursuit of the truth had led her into darkness, a darkness that now clung to the very walls of the room. As the forensic team combed through the room for clues, a faint chemical scent lingered in the air, a reminder of secrets long kept hidden. The landlord, pale-faced and trembling, could only murmur about doors left unlocked and mysteries left untouched. Elise's life had been that of a dedicated paralegal, unraveling the threads of corporate deception at a prestigious law firm. But her discoveries had led her to a truth too dangerous to ignore, a truth that had cost her everything. In the silence of the room, Detective Morgan pieced together the fragments of Elise's final days. Colleagues spoke of her descent into isolation, her discovery of falsified documents, her determination to expose the darkness lurking within the firm's polished walls. The investigation revealed a web of deceit, a tangled mess of financial transactions and hidden agendas. Behind the facade of success lay a trail of corruption, leading straight to the heart of darkness. Hidden beneath a loose floorboard lay a key that unlocked a vault of damning evidence. Audio recordings whispered of manipulated data, of lives sacrificed on the altar of greed. Elise's voice mingled with that of a man whose thirst for power had consumed him whole. As the truth unfurled like a dark flower, the enigmatic figure of Vincent Harriman emerged from the shadows. His steps, his words, his very presence painted a picture of a man driven by ambition, no matter the cost. The passage hidden behind the closet wall whispered of secrets long kept buried, of sins too dark to see the light of day. Vincent Harriman's arrest sent ripples through the community, a reckoning for a man who thought himself untouchable. In the courtroom, the echoes of Elise's voice rang clear, a ghostly presence demanding justice. Her mother's words, a plea for truth in a world of lies, echoed through the empty halls of justice. The house, once a sanctuary of deceit, now stood empty and forlorn, its secrets laid bare for all to see. The light in the upstairs window flickered like a beacon, a reminder of a young woman's courage in the face of darkness. As night fell, the house whispered its secrets to the wind, a lullaby of justice served, of truths uncovered. And in the darkness, Elise's spirit lingered, a silent sentinel watching over the house where she had made her final stand. Story 16, the town kept silent about the house standing at the edge of the woods, a solitary figure with darkened windows and a porch burdened by the weight of time. No one laid claim to it, no one recalled its builder. Yet when a group of hikers strayed too near, they beheld a peculiar sight, names etched into the wooden siding, deeply carved like cautionary tales. At the very bottom, fresh and untouched, was a name unfamiliar to all. Until a whisper broke the silence, a voice quivering with fear, "That name belongs to me." The call came in the dead of night, a routine report of trespassing. The voice on the line belonged to Mason Wright, the lead hiker who had stumbled upon his own name engraved on the abandoned house. Responding officers anticipated mere mischief, perhaps the work of adolescents playing a prank. What they encountered, however, defied all explanation. Detective Sarah Keller arrived as nightfall blanketed the forest. Her flashlight pierced the darkness, revealing the weathered facade of the structure. 27 names adorned the eastern wall, some fading with time, others sharp as if freshly carved. And at the end, Mason Wright, the incision still faintly smelling of sawdust. "I've never set foot here before," Mason affirmed, his breath forming mist in the chilly air. "I cannot fathom how anyone would know my name." The investigation commenced with background checks on each listed name, sending shivers down the spines of the detective team. Every name belonged to a person reported missing over the past 40 years. Some cases had gone cold, others remained open. Yet all shared a chilling similarity: the individuals had vanished while hiking alone. Forensic experts meticulously documented each carving, noting the varying depths, techniques, and weathering patterns. The oldest name, Rebecca Hansen, linked to a missing persons case from 37 years ago, a tale of a young woman who ventured into the woods and never returned, leaving behind only a solitary hiking boot by a stream. Detective Keller extensively interviewed Mason, whose account remained unwavering. He had no ties to the area beyond this particular hiking trip with 4 college companions, chosen randomly from an online suggestion. None of his background connected him to the other names adorning the wall outside. Attention then turned to Mason's friends. Emily Chen, the group's photographer, provided snapshots from their hike. Upon scrutiny, analysts noted a disconcerting anomaly: a blurred figure lurking in the background of 3 separate photos, a tall, slender silhouette partly obscured by trees. "We saw no one else on the trail," Emily insisted. "We would have remembered." Detective Keller ordered a search of the house's interior. Despite its appearance of abandonment, dust coating every surface, furniture in disarray, a grim discovery awaited in the basement. Personal effects of the missing hikers were neatly arranged on wooden shelves: watches, backpacks, cameras, wallets, each bearing a name matching those on the exterior wall. Under ultraviolet light, traces of bloodstains emerged on the concrete floor, evidence of attempts at cleansing. Cadaver dogs signaled repeatedly near the densest part of the forest behind the property, hinting at buried secrets. As the investigation progressed, Detective Keller observed peculiar behavior from Mason Wright. He reported eerie incidents, whispers outside his residence, footprints leading to his door but not away, shadowy figures lurking in the street. Despite assigned protection, Mason's paranoia escalated. A breakthrough came with the unearthing of land records in county archives. The house had belonged to a reclusive hunter named Victor Blackwood, a man seldom seen by neighbors, described as unnaturally tall and thin, avoiding interaction. Blackwood vanished without a trace 15 years prior, his disappearance left uninvestigated. A warrant granted access for a deeper search into the surrounding forest. Amongst the trees, a network of primitive hunting blinds was discovered, strategically positioned along popular hiking routes. Inside one blind, a journal was found detailing meticulous observations of hikers' routes, equipment, patterns. The entries grew increasingly disturbing, transitioning from animal hunting tactics to treating humans as prey, with elaborate accounts of selecting victims. A manhunt for Blackwood launched across jurisdictions, utilizing helicopters equipped with thermal imaging and tactical teams scouring every crevice. The suspect remained elusive. Mason Wright ceased all communication. Upon entering his apartment, officers found it deserted, except for a freshly carved inscription on his bedroom wall: "The hunter becomes the hunted." The search for Mason yielded no results. However, during a subsequent sweep of Blackwood's residence, forensic technicians made a chilling discovery: a concealed workshop behind a false wall in the basement. Woodworking tools, preservatives, and a freshly carved piece of wood bearing a new name were uncovered. Detective Keller recognized the name instantly. It belonged to the lead forensic technician who had processed the house initially, absent due to illness. Authorities established a vigilant perimeter around the house, surveillance systems monitoring every movement. Then, one fateful night, sensors were triggered. Footage captured an impossibly tall, slender figure emerging from the forest, approaching the house with eerie calm. As tactical teams closed in, the figure vanished without a trace. Today, the house remains under constant watch. Mason Wright and the forensic technician were never located. The investigation persists, with additional resources allocated as similar disappearances are reported in other wooded areas. The names carved on the wall have become infamous among law enforcement circles. Some officers refuse to utter them aloud, while others shy away from the case entirely. Local hikers steer clear of the house, fearful that merely speaking of it may add their names to the ominous list, names unspoken. Story 17. In a quaint coffee shop that had become a sanctuary for him, a man with no name, known only as John Doe, vanished without a trace, leaving behind a wallet with empty personal details. Detective Sarah Mercer delved into the mystery, replaying security footage that captured John's enigmatic disappearance. He had entered, sat down at his usual spot, but never re-emerged. The footage revealed his normalcy, yet his vanishing act defied logic. As Mercer studied the wallet's contents, she found cryptic clues, blank spaces where a name should be, credit cards unlinked to any accounts, and a mysterious phone number that led to eerie silence. The barista's recollections painted a picture of a solitary man, always writing in a coded notebook, hinting at a hidden world within his mind. The notebook's pages revealed intricate codes and sketches of unfamiliar structures, baffling investigators. Mercer's pursuit led her to a peculiar discovery: the coffee shop's antique mirror, adorned with symbols akin to those in John's notebook. Behind the mirror, a hidden compartment held identical wallets and a journal detailing experiments in temporal manipulation and identity transference. Intriguingly, the journal spoke of a nexus point at the coffee shop where realities converged, and a mirror acted as a gateway for crossing between worlds. Bizarre occurrences around the shop intensified, with witnesses claiming to see John Doe's spectral presence and reflections moving independently. A breakthrough came from a retired physicist, Margaret Keller, who who shed light on John Doe's true identity as Daniel Weston, a brilliant scientist lost to a quantum mirror experiment. Weston believed in the existence of parallel realities and sought to breach the boundaries between them. Mercer's investigation unraveled a connection between Weston's research facility and the coffee shop's location, revealing a nexus of interdimensional energies. The final pieces of the puzzle fell into place when Mercer, alone in the darkened shop, witnessed dual versions of Weston, in the mirror a haunting glimpse of a man split between worlds. As the mirror shattered, Weston's enigmatic note foretold the closure of his experiment and warned against further pursuit. The case of the man who straddled realities remained an enigma, leaving Mercer haunted by the mysteries she had uncovered. The coffee shop's closure marked the end of an era, with Weston's fate and his spectral presence in the shop fading into obscurity. Detective Mercer's resignation signaled the end of her official quest, yet whispers lingered of her continued obsession with Weston's work. In the quiet of her home, she found solace in a notebook akin to Weston's, a fragment of the mirror's legacy hanging on her wall, a reminder of the thin veil between worlds that she had dared to glimpse. Story 18. In the stillness of the night, a faint flicker danced across the baby monitor screen, like a ghostly whisper in the digital realm. At first, the mother brushed it off as mere interference, a glitch in the wires that connected her to her son's nursery. But then the crackling static gave way to a voice, soft and unsettling, urging, "SHHH, go back to sleep." A chill crept down her spine, her heart quickening with an inexplicable dread. With trembling hands and a racing pulse, she hurried to her son's room, each step echoing like a drumbeat of fear in the silent house. Upon reaching the crib, her worst fears materialized. The tiny form of her infant son was nowhere to be found. Panic surged through her veins as she scanned the room, finding everything in its place except for a solitary stuffed rabbit, its unblinking, glassy eyes fixed upon her with an eerie knowingness. The mother, Rebecca, would later recount the nightmarish ordeal to the authorities, her voice raw from screaming into the void. Emergency services were summoned by concerned neighbors, arriving to find her cradling the stuffed rabbit, lost in a world of torment and disbelief. Samuel, her precious 4-month-old baby, had vanished without a trace, leaving behind a void that swallowed her whole. As the investigation unfolded, it revealed a web of shadows and secrets that cast doubt upon the very foundations of trust. How could a child disappear from a locked home without a single sign of forced entry? Suspicion turned to Rebecca, haunted by whispers of postpartum struggles and a marriage strained by the weight of parenthood. But then a glimmer of hope emerged, a clue as delicate as a spider's silk fluttering in the breeze. Microscopic fibers, alien to the household, clung to the nursery windowsill, hinting at an intruder's clandestine entry from the outside world. The focus shifted to the shadows beyond, where a dark figure lurked in the night, leaving behind traces of a sinister presence. Daniel, the absent husband, returned to a house cloaked in shadows of doubt and betrayal. His hands bore the marks of a hidden past, his hobby of rock climbing now a beacon of suspicion in the eyes of the investigators. A thread of deceit unraveled as financial records painted a damning portrait of greed and deception. The investigation reached a turning point when the baby monitor, once a beacon of safety, revealed its true nature, a tool of manipulation and deceit. The voice that had whispered in the night was not of this world, but a phantom crafted by unseen hands to sow chaos and despair. In a basement shrouded in darkness, a woman named Elaine was found cradling Samuel, a living ghost from a past long buried. Her eyes, vacant and haunted, spoke of a sorrow that transcended time and reason. Through a tapestry of lies and betrayal, the truth emerged, a tale of lost love, shattered dreams, and a desperate bid for redemption. As the courtroom fell into a hushed silence, the echoes of a broken family reverberated through the walls of justice. Daniel and Elaine, bound by a web of deceit, faced the harsh judgment of their peers. Rebecca and Samuel, scarred but resilient, sought solace in a new beginning far from the shadows of the past. The baby monitor, now a silent witness to the truth, stood as a sentinel of a night that would forever haunt their dreams. In its digital memory lay the echoes of a whispered lullaby, a chilling reminder that not all secrets stay buried in the darkness. And so, as the world drifted into slumber, the mystery of that fateful night lingered like a ghostly whisper in the night, beckoning the weary to find peace in the arms of sleep. Story 19. She desired to redecorate the nursery prior to the baby's arrival. The walls sported a worn-out shade of blue, carrying within them countless untold tales of the past. As she applied the initial coat of white paint, a hidden secret was unveiled, faint letters at first, then gradually becoming more defined and legible. A message engraved beneath the surface. "Don't let it hear you," her breath hitched. She took a step back, and in that moment she noticed them tiny handprints in the fresh paint, positioned too high on the wall for any child to have reached. This startling discovery within the nursery of the Morgan household marked the inception of what would later be known as the Whispering House case. The young couple had recently bought the Victorian-style residence at a surprisingly low price. The realtor had only mentioned minor cosmetic issues, failing to disclose the property's ominous past. Detective Sarah Klein, holding her notebook, pressed the doorbell. A pregnant woman, her belly pronounced beneath paint-stained overalls, answered the door. Dark circles framed her eyes, a sign of sleepless nights. The detective observed the woman's trembling hands as she recounted finding the mysterious message and handprints. The previous owners vanished suddenly, the woman explained. Neighbors claimed they left in the dead of night, no moving truck, just essentials packed into their car. Detective Klein traversed the historic home, the sound of her footsteps echoing on aged floorboards. Standing in the nursery, she scrutinized the partly painted wall where the message still lingered beneath the abandoned paint. Adjacent to it, 5 small handprints pressed into the wet paint, positioned at a height suitable for an adult. Back at the precinct, Detective Klein delved into the property's records. The house had changed owners 8 times in 30 years, a remarkably high turnover rate. Each family had resided there for less than 2 years. More troubling were the child welfare reports linked to 3 of those families. Children reported hearing whispers from the walls and feeling as though someone watched them sleep. The detective delved deeper, examining construction records and historical documents. The house had once belonged to Eleanor Blackwood, a wealthy widow who ran a small orphanage from the property during the early industrial era. Newspaper clippings mentioned 5 children who had disappeared from her care. Authorities at the time assumed they had run away, a common occurrence for orphans in that era. When Eleanor passed away, workers renovating the house stumbled upon a sealed room hidden behind the nursery wall. Inside, they discovered children's belongings, tiny shoes, toys, and clothing, but no remains. The case went cold, buried in dusty archives. Detective Klein interviewed former residents, piecing together a troubling pattern. Each family with children recounted strange incidents. Toys moved during the night, childish laughter echoing in empty corridors, and crayon drawings appearing on walls. Most dismissed these occurrences as mere imagination until the writing surfaced. The message varied slightly in each account. Don't let them find you. Don't make a sound. Don't let it hear you. The same handwriting always emerged during nursery repaints. A forensic linguist compared photographs of the writing to samples from Alina Blackwood's journals and confirmed a match. Even more unsettling were the handprints uniform in size and placement over decades, despite different children inhabiting the home. The investigation took a chilling turn when the detective persuaded the current owners to permit ground-penetrating radar in the basement. The technician identified anomalies in the readings, 5 distinct shapes beneath the concrete floor, each resembling a child's size. Workers broke through the concrete, unveiling a gruesome revelation. 5 small sets of remains arranged in a circle. Forensic analysis indicated that the children had perished during Eleanor's ownership of the house. Each child wore a pendant engraved with their name, the 5 orphans who had allegedly run away. The detective ordered luminol to be sprayed throughout the nursery. In the darkness, handprints glowed on every wall, hidden beneath layers of paint, unseen to the naked eye. Hundreds of them at varying heights, as if the children had tried to climb out. Alina's journals, retrieved from county archives, exposed her twisted beliefs. She thought orphaned children possessed unique spiritual energy. By confining them in the hidden room, she believed she could harness their life force to prolong her own existence. The children had scratched warnings into the walls using their nails and bits of metal, hoping future residents would uncover their tragic fate. The case concluded with the proper burial of the 5 victims. Their names were finally recorded as murder victims, not runaways. The house remained vacant, the pregnant couple refusing to return even for their belongings. Detective Klein submitted her final report, including photographs of the luminol-illuminated handprints and the hidden message. She noted that while justice had been served for the original victims, an inexplicable presence lingered in that house, something that transcended layers of paint and time. The nursery walls were demolished during cleanup, yet workers reported hearing children's whispers emanating from the debris. None were willing to return after their shift ended. The house was eventually condemned, becoming another cold case file in a dusty cabinet, a tangible resolution, yet leaving unanswered spiritual inquiries. The detective retained one photograph from the case, 5 luminol handprints glowing in the darkness, a haunting reminder that some crimes imprint lasting marks that no amount of fresh paint can erase. Story 20, nestled in the heart of a quiet suburban neighborhood, the Mercer family's new home held secrets deeper than its creaking floors and faded siding revealed. The winter shadows clung to the house like a shroud, concealing the hidden history waiting to be uncovered. As the Mercers peeled back the layers of their new dwelling, they stumbled upon a forgotten door hidden beneath the old carpet. A door that defied the realtor's listing and the official blueprints. It beckoned them with a heavy, rusted handle, whispering of mysteries long forgotten. With a collective effort, they pried the door open, releasing a rush of stale air heavy with the scent of damp earth. The steps leading downward disappeared into darkness, a foreboding invitation into the unknown. What they expected to find was mere storage space, but what awaited them was a chilling revelation. A solitary chair stood in the center of the small basement, illuminated by a single swaying light bulb casting eerie shadows across the walls. And there, in a chilling display, hung a row of photographs, familiar faces captured in intimate moments, taken from within the very walls of their own home. The arrival of Detective Sarah Connors and her team marked the beginning of a harrowing investigation. The basement became a crime scene, a place tainted by unseen eyes and unheard whispers, the past intertwined with the present in a sinister dance that left the family reeling. As Connors delved deeper, the history of the house unfolded like a dark tapestry. Previous owners, each staying for a fleeting moment before fleeing the shadows that lurked within. The house bore witness to secrets untold, its walls concealing more than just bricks and mortar. The discovery of hidden surveillance equipment painted a portrait of obsession and intrusion. Cameras hidden in plain sight, capturing the daily lives of unsuspecting families. A journal filled with meticulous observations, a testament to a man named Edward Kelvin who had vanished into the very structure he had built. Kelvin's distorted reality came to light as he was found curled within the labyrinth of his creation, a ghostly figure haunting the hidden spaces of the house. His delusions painted a picture of a guardian, a protector of the house and its inhabitants, oblivious to the violation he had committed. The trial that followed unveiled the extent of Kelvin's twisted design, a house built not just of bricks and beams, but of secrets and surveillance. The families who had unknowingly played their roles in his twisted drama were left shattered, their sense of security forever fractured. As the house was reduced to rubble and the ground beneath it filled, the memories of its dark past lingered like ghostly whispers in the minds of those who had called it home. The Mercers, like so many before them, carried the weight of unseen eyes watching, unseen ears listening, a chilling reminder of the shadows that lurked within the walls of their once beloved home. And as they moved forward, carrying only what could fit in their suitcases, they couldn't help but wonder if the walls of their new abode held secrets of their own. If the shadows that danced in the corners were merely figments of their imagination or echoes of a past that refused to fade into the night. Story 21. Once upon a time, a mysterious key arrived in the mail, concealed within a plain envelope devoid of any return address. It was a single brass key, weathered by the hands of time. The homeowner, a woman named Sarah Miller, couldn't place where it came from, yet there was a strange sense of familiarity that lingered around it. Despite her attempts to fit it into every lock she owned, none responded to its touch. It was a key without a purpose in her world. But when Sarah placed the enigmatic key on her coffee table, an eerie occurrence unfolded. The old grandfather clock in the hallway, long silenced by the passage of years, let out a solitary, haunting chime that echoed through the silent house. It was a sound that sent shivers down her spine, a sound that spoke of secrets hidden in the shadows. Puzzled and unsettled by this inexplicable event, Sarah decided to report it to the authorities. What seemed like a trivial mishap soon spiraled into a nightmarish tale of darkness that would grip the peaceful suburban neighborhood in fear. The responding officer initially brushed off Sarah's concerns, attributing the key's arrival to a simple mistake. However, Sarah's intuition whispered that something was amiss, a feeling she couldn't shake. Reluctantly, the officer accepted the key as evidence, sealing it within a small evidence bag that would later become a crucial piece in a sprawling investigation. The case landed on the desk of Detective Robert Harmon, a seasoned investigator from the Special Victims Unit. With a keen intuition honed by years of experience, he sensed that this seemingly innocuous key held the key to unraveling a sinister mystery lurking beneath the surface. As he studied the unassuming brass key sitting on his desk, a sense of unease crept over him. Background checks on Sarah revealed a clean record, a retired teacher with no hint of malice in her past. The forensic team found only her fingerprints on the key, and the envelope yielded no clues except for a generic postmark. A breakthrough came when Detective Harmon decided to delve deeper, running the key's unique pattern through the department database. A chilling revelation emerged, a connection to a cold case from years ago, a case that had remained unsolved, shrouded in shadows. The key belonged to a storage unit where horrors beyond comprehension had been discovered: blood-stained carpets, cutting tools, and images of women whose fates had been sealed in darkness. The original investigation had hit a dead end, but now a glimmer of hope emerged as the pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place. With renewed vigor, Harmon dug into the dusty case files, tracing the key's origins to a man named Harold Jenkins, a shadow in the night who had once lived just streets away from Sarah. As the investigation deepened, a chilling portrait of Jenkins emerged: a man with a hidden past, a man who had slipped through the cracks of society unnoticed. The search for Jenkins intensified as the truth of his atrocities came to light. Behind the facade of a quiet neighbor lurked a predator, a monster who had carefully orchestrated a symphony of terror for years. As investigators closed in on Jenkins, the community held its breath, gripped by fear and disbelief. The manhunt spread nationwide, a race against time to stop a madman who had eluded justice for far too long. In a remote cabin tied to Jenkins' name, a chamber of horrors was unearthed: a hidden room filled with rows of brass keys, each one a grim reminder of lives lost and souls shattered. The keys told a tale of unspeakable horrors, of lives extinguished in the darkness. The true extent of Jenkins' depravity was revealed as forensic teams uncovered the remains of his victims buried in the earth, their stories silenced but not forgotten. The hunt for Jenkins reached its climax as authorities closed in on his location, a showdown that would decide the fate of a community haunted by the specter of evil. In a final, desperate act, Jenkins chose to end his own life rather than face the consequences of his deeds. But even in death, his legacy of terror lived on a journal detailing his crimes, a chilling manifesto addressed to Sarah, the unwitting recipient of his twisted gift. As the dust settled and the truth emerged, the community grappled with the aftermath of a nightmare unleashed. Families found closure, but also the unbearable weight of grief, knowing that their loved ones had fallen victim to a monster hiding in plain sight. Sarah, forever changed by the darkness that had touched her life, never returned to her home, haunted by the knowledge of how close she had come to the abyss. The clock that had chimed mysteriously was revealed to be a pawn in Jenkins' twisted game, a silent witness to the horrors that had unfolded. The case of Harold Jenkins, the Keymaster, stood as a stark reminder of the evil that lurks beneath the surface of seemingly ordinary lives. And as the keys sat in the evidence locker, mute testimony to the lives lost and the darkness that had been unleashed, the world grappled with the chilling truth that some nightmares walk among us, hidden in plain sight. Story 22. In the quiet stillness of the night, a wooden plank shifted under her weight, revealing a hidden secret beneath her feet. Intrigued, she knelt down, her fingers tracing the edges of the loose board, sensing a mysterious presence lurking below. With deliberate care, she lifted the boards, unveiling a shadowy, clandestine space beneath the old house. As her eyes adjusted to the dim light, she discerned the outlines of a mattress, a chair, and a weathered notebook tucked away in a corner. Her heart quickened as she noticed her name scrawled repeatedly on the pages. Detective Morgan Reed observed silently as Sarah Coleman peered into the abyss that had been concealed beneath her new dwelling. Sarah's gaze held a mixture of fear and disbelief, a realization that her sanctuary had been violated by a malevolent force. "Don't disturb anything," Detective Reed cautioned, her voice a soothing presence in the eerie atmosphere. A beam of light from her flashlight pierced the darkness, revealing walls adorned with surveillance photographs capturing Sarah's every move, evidence of a twisted obsession that had remained hidden for far too long. The house had been acquired from the estate of the reclusive Walter Green, a man unknown to Sarah. The neighbors spoke of his solitude, and the inspection reports had mentioned nothing of the hidden chamber. "I never met him," Sarah murmured, her voice barely above a whisper. "I thought that space was sealed off." Crime scene investigators arrived, their tools echoing through the silent house as they meticulously documented every detail of the hidden room. Fingerprints belonging to Walter Green painted a haunting picture of his fixation on Sarah, a fixation that had spanned years without her awareness. The chilling truth emerged as the investigators pieced together Walter's meticulous surveillance and unsettling replicas of Sarah's belongings found in a storage unit. His delusional belief in a destined union with her sent shivers down their spines as they uncovered his troubled past and disturbing intentions. Detained by a dark history of obsession, Walter's fantasies had spiraled into a dangerous reality that had narrowly missed claiming Sarah as its victim. The psychological evaluation painted a grim portrait of a man driven by delusions of a love that could never be. Sarah chose to leave the house behind, haunted by the questions of what might have been had she not uncovered the hidden room. The case closed with Walter's demise, but the echoes of his twisted obsession lingered, a cautionary tale of unseen dangers and the fragile line between safety and peril. As life moved on, the house found new occupants, oblivious to the secrets concealed beneath its floors. The hidden room was sealed off, the past locked away from prying eyes. Yet for those who knew the truth, the memory of the room beneath the floor whispered of the darkness that can reside in the most unsuspecting places, a reminder of the shadows that lurk just beyond the surface of our everyday lives. Story 23. It started with a pocket dial, a mere accident of static and muffled sounds. The operator was about to dismiss it until a voice broke through the confusion. A woman's voice whispering urgently, "He's here." And then silence descended like a heavy curtain. The call originated from an empty house, a place forgotten by time, abandoned for years. No signs of forced entry, no traces of disturbance. Yet in the quiet stillness of the dust-covered kitchen, there sat a phone on the counter, its screen eerily aglow. The call had been placed only moments ago. Detective Morgan Reed, consumed by curiosity, pressed the playback button repeatedly. The whisper lingered in her mind, filled with desperation, tinged with terror, and utterly inexplicable. This abandoned property once belonged to the Sullivan family, who had left after a devastating fire ravaged the west wing of their home. Since then, no one had resided within its walls. The caretaker, a faithful visitor, swore that no one had trespassed in years. "Can we trace the number?" Morgan inquired of her partner, Detective Walsh. The response came swiftly. "Registered to Catherine Sullivan, the deceased daughter. She perished in a car accident 3 years ago." Morgan's gaze fixated on the evidence bag holding the mysterious phone. The pieces of the puzzle refused to fit together. A deceased woman's phone connecting to an abandoned dwelling. The dust around the phone seemed disturbed only where it sat, as though it had materialized out of thin air. The forensic team's efforts yielded little. No identifiable fingerprints on the device, just vague smudges impossible to trace. No footprints leading to or from the house. The doors remained locked, the windows sealed shut. The heart of their investigation became those fleeting 11 seconds of static, of labored breathing, and the cryptic 5 words spoken in a familiar voice. Analysis confirmed a 98% match to Catherine Sullivan's voice from past recordings. The call had occurred exactly at the time of her demise 3 years prior. down to the minute. Morgan and Walsh delved into Catherine's past, interviewing everyone who had known her. Her father, now remarried, appeared genuinely perplexed. Her mother, residing in a modest apartment, crumbled upon hearing the recording. "That's my Katie," she murmured. "She sounds so frightened." Mark Jennings, Catherine's boyfriend at the time of her death, had a solid alibi for the night of the call. He had been working a night shift at the hospital, corroborated by numerous witnesses and security footage. The house had sat empty. The call seemed impossible, yet it had happened. Investigation hit a standstill until a call from Catherine's mother reignited a spark of hope. "I found something among her belongings," she quivered. "Katie kept a journal, the final entry. You must see it." The journal unveiled a tale of Catherine's relationship with Mark, beginning with love, descending into control and isolation, and culminating in fear. The last entry spoke volumes. "He discovered my plans to leave. His anger knows no bounds. If anything befalls me, it's no accident." Confronted once more, Mark's fa-a-deck crumbled under the weight of the journal's revelations. "You believe I harmed Katie because of her words," he retorted. "That's not evidence." Morgan pointed out, "You were the first responder at the accident scene before the authorities arrived." Mark stammered, "I was concerned when she didn't show up. I went searching for her." Her vehicle veered off a remote road. "How did you know where to look?" Mark's complexion drained of color. "I already told you I was anxious." Revisiting the accident site, investigators unearthed a chilling truth. Though Catherine's car had been towed away long ago, a ground-penetrating radar scan exposed a buried secret 20 feet from the crash site: Catherine's actual phone. The device discovered in the house was her spare, kept at her parents' residence. Examination of the buried phone unveiled deleted texts between Catherine and her sister on the fatal night. "Mark has discovered my intentions to leave him. He's tailing me in his car. And later, he's forcing me off the road." A fresh review of Catherine's autopsy photos revealed discrepancies. The injuries did not align solely with the car crash. Defensive wounds on her hands, bruises hinting at strangulation. When authorities arrived to apprehend Mark, he had vanished. His dwelling housed a shrine dedicated to Catherine: photographs, stolen mementos, and news clippings about her demise. Amidst his possessions, an audio editing software and scripts were discovered, outlining how he had crafted the ghost call by splicing Catherine's voice from archived recordings. The call had been his twisted ploy to revisit his crime, a macabre charade to confound investigators and torment Catherine's grieving kin. The inquiry expanded to previous cases involving Mark, an emergency responder. 2 additional deaths of young women under suspicious circumstances surfaced, both ruled as accidents. Both had been romantically linked to Mark. 6 days into the pursuit, officers located Mark's vehicle outside the Sullivan house. Inside, he sat motionless in the kitchen, fixated on a phone identical to Catherine's. Surrendering without resistance, he confessed to Morgan during interrogation. She refused to remain silent, even after I silenced her. She persisted, accusing me. I needed everyone to hear her voice to believe she lingered somewhere beyond. A phantom can't testify against me. The jury swiftly reached a verdict of guilty for Mark on the charge of first-degree murder. As the sentence was pronounced, Catherine's mother clutched the journal to her chest. Justice had arrived at last, not through supernatural means, but through the echoes of Catherine's voice, her words, her fears etched in ink, her final, desperate cries for deliverance. The phone from the desolate house now resides in the evidence vault. Occasionally, whispers circulate among officers of phantom rings, though the phone's battery was removed long ago. Catherine's tale endures, not as a spectral legend, but as a testament to the resilience of victims, their voices resonating even when silenced. Story 24. The apartment lay silent and empty for months, a place shrouded in mystery and neglect. When the new tenants crossed its threshold, their expectations were low, a layer of dust, perhaps some forgotten relics of the past. Yet one door stood defiantly closed, resisting all attempts to reveal its secrets. A closet, locked from within, hiding its truths behind a barrier of wood and metal. With a determined effort, the landlord finally coerced the stubborn door to yield. Anticipation hung heavy in the air as they braced themselves for what lay beyond. But what they found inside sent a shiver down their spines. The walls, once pristine, were now marred with deep, jagged scratches etched into the very fiber of the wood, as if by desperate hands seeking escape. And in the dim corner of the closet, an old flip phone lay abandoned, its screen still faintly illuminated by a single unread message. Detective Morgan Shaw, a seasoned investigator with a keen eye for the enigmatic, surveyed the scene before her. It was not the sight of blood or violence that unsettled her, but the silent screams of those scratch marks, whispering of confinement and struggle. Forensics now, she directed her partner, Officer Reed, who diligently captured the haunting evidence before them, and gather all records of the previous tenants. The message on the phone, simple yet chilling, bore witness to unseen horrors. "I know what you did." The landlord, a man of nervous disposition and furtive glances, spoke of the previous tenant, a young woman named Emma Caldwell, who had vanished without a trace, leaving rent unpaid in her wake. Quiet, kept to herself, he mumbled, his gaze skirting the closet as if afraid of what lurked within. No trouble. Forensics uncovered a grim tale hidden within the scratches on the walls, traces of blood, mostly belonging to Emma herself, reported missing and presumed gone for good. But amidst the familiar DNA, two samples stood out, one unidentified, the other belonging to a man long declared deceased. "Impossible," Shaw muttered as she absorbed the startling revelation. Derek Mercer, a man believed dead, now linked to the haunting imprints in that forsaken closet. Emma's apartment painted a portrait of interrupted life, neglected mail, a forgotten coffee mug, a bed meticulously made. Phone records revealed a sudden cessation of contact with her sister, replaced by a barrage of calls from an unknown number in the days leading to her disappearance. A new boyfriend, Officer Reed shared, intense, private, name unknown. Surveillance footage captured a shadowy figure entering the building behind Emma, his features obscured by a baseball cap, a man who bore the fingerprints of a ghost. Derek Mercer, the orchestrator of a macabre symphony of captivity and fear. As the investigation unfolded, a connection emerged to another missing woman, Lynette Porter, a name lost to time until now. Shaw's meticulous reconstruction of events led them to a secluded property owned by the Mercer family, where the echoes of Emma's captivity reverberated in the form of Lynette, alive but broken, imprisoned in shadows akin to those that had ensnared her predecessor. "He made me watch," Lynette whispered, her eyes vacant with trauma. "Learn what happens to those who try to escape." Journals, photographs, and chilling recordings bore witness to Mercer's twisted obsession with dominance and control, his victims mere pawns in a game of suffering. The manhunt for Derek Mercer spanned jurisdictions, a hunt for a predator who thrived on the agony of others. When he was finally apprehended, a new identity clutched in his hands, the depths of his depravity were laid bare for all to see. During interrogation, Mercer exuded a calm demeanor, a facade of normalcy that belied the darkness within. "She sent that message herself," he claimed, his words dripping with malice. "She sought salvation, but she found only me." The trial unveiled Mercer's intricate web of deceit, his elaborate ruse to evade justice and inflict torment upon those unfortunate enough to cross his path. Emma's fate, sealed in that closet of horrors, remained a mystery, her voice silenced but not forgotten. As the gavel fell and Mercer faced the consequences of his atrocities, a faint smile played on his lips, a silent acknowledgement of a truth known only to him. Lynette Porter, standing tall in the courtroom, declared her resilience in the face of darkness, her spirit unbroken by the shadows that once engulfed her. The legacy of the case reverberated through the department, reshaping protocols and procedures for missing persons investigations. Detective Shaw, a guardian of justice amidst the shadows, kept a piece of that cursed closet as a reminder of the enduring strength found in the fight for survival. In the stillness of the night, as the world drifted into slumber, the tale of Emma Caldwell and the malevolent specter of Derek Mercer whispered through the darkness, a cautionary lullaby of the dangers that lurk unseen, waiting to ensnare the unwary in their grasp. Story 25, the apartment exuded an air of age, its walls whispering tales of bygone days. The heating system groaned and the pipes rattled, a symphony of antiquity that echoed through the corridors. She, the occupant, brushed off these sounds as commonplace, part of the building's character. But then a voice, soft yet unmistakable, floated through the vents like a gentle breeze. It wasn't the typical buzz of neighbors conversing, it was a whisper, calling her name in hushed tones. Intrigued and slightly unnerved, she leaned closer, pressing her ear against the vent, her heart quickening its pace. A chill brushed past her cheek, followed by a delicate, almost playful declaration, "I know you can hear me." Detective Morgan Shaw stood in the heart of the empty apartment, her gaze locked on the rusty vent cover pried open from the wall. Around her, the forensics team meticulously cataloged the scene, capturing every detail with their flashing cameras. The missing woman, Alina Reeves, had vanished without a trace until a faint odor drew attention to her absence after 7 days. What they uncovered within the ventilation system defied logic. Officer Patel, flipping through his notepad, recounted. She claimed to hear voices coming from the vents. Building management dismissed her concerns, attributing them to the aging heating system's peculiar noises. Shaw knelt by the vent, observing the deep scratch marks etched around its edges. "These marks are not from tools," she murmured to herself. The frantic gouges in the metal spoke of desperation, of fingernails clawing desperately from within. Alina had been a beloved figure, a kindergarten teacher with a radiant smile and a collection of thriving houseplants adorning her windowsill. Her absence was felt keenly by her students who crafted cards in her honor. Her sister, the one who reported her missing, revealed during an interview, she grew increasingly paranoid before she disappeared. Alina was convinced someone was watching her, speaking to her through the vents in her apartment. "I thought it was just work stress." Shaw re-examined the apartment through a new lens. The immaculately made bed, the forgotten coffee mug in the sink, the chair placed strategically beneath the vent as if awaiting a listener. The forensic report disclosed unsettling findings: fibers matching Alina's favorite cardigan snagged in the vent, a foreign fingerprint inside the cover, and chilling audio recordings from Alina's phone. Alone in her car, rain tapping a soothing melody on the roof, Shaw listened to the recordings. Alina's trembling voice quivered, seeking validation from the mysterious presence. A whispered reply, barely audible, sent shivers down Shaw's spine. "Alina, sweet Alina, let me in." Investigating the building's history unearthed a disturbing pattern. Previous tenants had fled, citing strange noises and eerie experiences. One even suffered from hallucinations of voices emanating from the vents, attributing them to carbon monoxide poisoning. The building superintendent, Harold Weber, a fixture for 15 years, displayed an unsettling tranquility during questioning, except when pressed about apartment 4B's past occupants. Weber's demeanor shifted imperceptibly when questioned about the prior tenants of 4B. A flicker of tension crossed his features, a subtle tightening of his posture. "I don't keep tabs on everyone who comes and goes," he deflected, his gaze distant. The investigation took a chilling turn when a hidden access panel was discovered in Aliner's bathroom, leading to a clandestine maintenance passage weaving through the walls. Inside, remnants of habitation emerged: a flashlight, a water bottle, discarded food wrappers. Someone had been dwelling within the walls, observing, listening, whispering. A search of Weber's apartment uncovered a meticulously organized computer, housing folders labeled by apartment numbers. Within the 4B folder lay a trove of intrusive recordings and photographs, a digital diary chronicling his fixation on Aliner. The most damning evidence emerged from a storage unit registered under Weber's name, housing mementos from past tenants, preserved like macabre souvenirs. Weber offered no resistance upon his arrest, his serene smile unsettling as he prophesied to Shaw, "They all hear me eventually. The building speaks through me." The coroner's report revealed Aliner's tragic fate, sedated and coerced into the ventilation system, drawn in by promises of sanctuary within the walls, only to perish in the labyrinth of ducts. Families of former tenants surfaced, recounting missing belongings and loved ones consumed by paranoia, haunted by unseen whispers. A haunting pattern of predation emerged, with Weber at its center, manipulating his victims through the vents until reality blurred with his whispered illusions. At trial, Weber's facade cracked, his attorney advocating an insanity defense countered by the prosecution's evidence of premeditation and meticulous surveillance. The jury swiftly returned a verdict of guilt on all counts. As Weber was escorted from the courtroom, his hollow smile fixed on Shaw, "They'll always hear me. The building remembers, the whispers endure." The once-occupied apartment building now stands deserted, despite renovations and new ownership. Residents speak of eerie sounds emanating from the vents, whispers lingering within the walls, and chilling drafts carrying phantom voices. The aging heating system groans, the pipes rattle, weaving a tapestry of whispers and mysteries that echo through the vacant halls. It's nothing out of the ordinary, or so they convince themselves. Story 26. In a quiet neighborhood, a mysterious package arrived at Sarah Miller's doorstep. No return address, no tracking number, just a damp cardboard box glistening with morning dew. The package was not meant for her. The name on it was unfamiliar, belonging to a certain Daniel Whitaker. Sarah hesitated, knowing she should have left it untouched. But curiosity, a persistent whisper in her mind, urged her to unravel the mystery within. With cautious fingers, she peeled back the tape, expecting mundane contents. Yet, what she found inside was far from ordinary: a VHS tape and a single note that simply said, "Watch alone." Sarah held the black plastic cassette in her hands, feeling its weight, sensing an unspoken heaviness. The tape seemed to carry a forbidden secret, its worn edges telling stories of the past. The accompanying note, scribbled with urgency, hinted at a hidden truth waiting to be unveiled. As Sarah stood in her kitchen, the familiar sounds of the neighborhood outside provided a backdrop to the unfolding mystery: a dog barking, children playing, the distant hum of a lawnmower. Intrigued yet apprehensive, Sarah inserted the tape into her old VCR. Static danced on the screen before gradually giving way to a dimly lit room. A man appeared, his features obscured by shadows at first. His voice, calm but burdened, identified him as Daniel Whitaker. He spoke of being framed for a crime he did not commit, of a woman named Catherine Walsh found dead, and his desperate plea for someone to believe his innocence. Detective Eliza Ramirez found herself entangled in the web of secrets surrounding Daniel Whitaker and Catherine Walsh's murder. As more tapes emerged, each revealing a piece of a sinister puzzle, Ramirez's investigation took an unexpected turn. Catherine's involvement in exposing a pharmaceutical company's wrongdoing shed light on a conspiracy that went deeper than anyone had imagined. Sarah Miller, drawn further into the unfolding drama, received a second package containing damning evidence against the powerful corporation. With the help of Ramirez and other tape recipients, the truth slowly came to light. Hidden in a storage unit, they uncovered the proof that exonerated Whitaker and exposed the true culprits behind the elaborate frame-up. In the end, justice prevailed, but not without leaving its mark on those involved. Whitaker, once a fugitive, emerged from the shadows, while Sarah pondered the serendipity that had led the package to her door. The tapes, now evidence of a dark chapter in their lives, served as a reminder that truth often arrives in unexpected ways, waiting for those willing to unravel its mystery. As Sarah and Whitaker stood in silent contemplation, they understood the delicate balance between truth and deception, between justice and manipulation. The wrong address, it seemed, had led them to the right path, a path paved with uncertainty, courage, and the unwavering pursuit of truth in a world shrouded in shadows. Story 27. The new owners perceived it as a mere peculiarity, the way the old intercom crackled in the dead of night. A relic of a bygone era, revamped but left to gather dust in obscurity. Then one fateful night, the husband, driven by curiosity, pressed the button. A faint whisper crackled through the speaker, sending shivers down his spine. "Why have you returned?" Startled, he recoiled, his hands trembling. His wife, standing silently behind him, murmured, "I never uttered those words." The Victorian manor stood majestically amidst ancient oak trees, its aged facade concealing a modernized interior. Daniel and Meredith Parker, the new owners, had acquired the property at a surprisingly affordable price, despite the real estate agent's uneasy demeanor during the tour. The intercom system, a charming feature interconnecting all rooms, had intrigued the history-loving couple. Detective Sarah Reeves arrived at the estate, the gravel crunching beneath her unmarked vehicle's tires. The call had indicated a possible break-in, but a subtle tone in the dispatcher's voice hinted at a deeper narrative. Daniel Parker, his complexion pallid even in the dim porch light, greeted her at the entrance. "It all started with the intercom," he recounted, guiding Detective Reeves through the grand foyer. "Initially it was just static, then whispers, then complete sentences. My wife thought I was imagining things until she heard it too." In the living room, Meredith sat rigid on an antique sofa, her hands clasping a steaming mug left untouched. "We came across something hidden behind the wall," she disclosed abruptly. Daniel wanted to expand the kitchen pantry, and when he removed the drywall, her voice faltered. Behind the wall, wrapped in deteriorating plastic, they uncovered a small leather-bound journal. Detective Reeves, donning gloves, delicately turned its brittle pages. The elegant yet frantic handwriting belonged to Alina, the apparent former owner, expressing her apprehensions about her husband Vincent's intentions. "The last entry dates back 30 years, Daniel elaborated. After that, silence. The previous owners mentioned they bought the house from an elderly man who relocated to a retirement community. Further investigation confirmed Vincent and Alina Blackwood as the former owners. Records indicated Vincent had sold the house soon after Alina's disappearance, without any official divorce or change of address for her. No financial activity was traced under Alina's name post the final journal entry. Detective Reeves mobilized a team to meticulously scour the property. Ground-penetrating radar revealed anomalies beneath the garden shed's concrete foundation. As the investigators breached the decades-old concrete, the truth emerged in the form of human remains. Forensic analysis identified the skeleton as a woman in her 40s, exhibiting signs of blunt force trauma to the skull. A gold wedding band on the remains bore the inscription, "To Alina, my eternal love." The case against Vincent Blackwood swiftly gained momentum. Despite his advanced age and residence in a care facility, his lucidity remained intact when confronted with the incriminating evidence. His chilling response to the accusations sent shivers down Detective Reeves' spine. "She wouldn't cease her chatter," Vincent remarked, his tone unnervingly composed, "constantly prattling through that infernal intercom, monitoring me, interrogating me. I disconnected it, but she reconnected it herself, claiming she wished to reach me always, no matter my location in the house." He gazed blankly ahead. "I merely yearned for silence." In his confession, Vincent unveiled how he meticulously fabricated the narrative of Alina abandoning him, even mailing postcards to neighbors from different locations, inscribed in forged penmanship. He resided in the house for years, treading daily over the concrete concealing his wife's resting place. The trial concluded swiftly, with Vincent pleading guilty to the heinous crime. The presiding judge underscored the premeditated nature of the act and the decades-long web of deceit. Daniel and Meredith eventually sold the property, unable to endure its grim past. Before departing, they held a memorial for Alina in the now-restored garden. The intercom system was dismantled during subsequent renovations by the new owners. Workers reported hearing static and whispers during the removal, attributing it to electrical interference. Detective Reeves revisited the Blackwood case file before its archival. As she shut the manila folder, she pondered how the house had seemingly transcended time to unveil its hidden truth. Justice finally caught up with Vincent Blackwood, courtesy of Alina's resolute voice. The local law enforcement dubbed the case the house that echoed back. Occasionally, Detective Reeves would pass by the property on her way home. Though she never halted, she would decelerate, window slightly ajar, attuned to whispers carried on the wind.